Oh hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Quest Fiction. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto has awakened all-powerful demon soul. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. Blood. It bathed the trees and grass. The stink of death overpowered the senses. She stared down at them. 3 dead bodies lay at her feet. Not an ounce of blood was left in the bodies. It was covering the grass and trees. She felt nothing as she stared down at the bodies. She had stood long ago. They interfered with her survive. Death was always twisted and linked with her. In some cruel and sick way it had become an art to her. The ability to take their life blood and splatter it all around their death scene. Ironic really, they were surrounded by their own life but still dead. It might have brought a smile to her lips. If she didn't hate it. If she didn't live through it night after night, drowning her own guilty. What did they call themselves? It sounded like something from a fairy tale of sorts. She scrunched up her brow in thought. Ninja. She shook her head clear of such thoughts. It was no use to think such things. She dropped to her knees as she stared at herself in a puddle of blood. She bit down on her crimson-colored lips and closed her blood-red eyes. She lifted her hand up to her ear and poked it. Her pointed elf-looking ears stood out as always. She shoved herself off of the ground with a sigh. The strange woman stared up at the night sky. How long until these, ninja, were noticed? She shook her head and stared down at the strange headband they wore. She crouched down and felt some of her hair fall over her shoulder. She pushed back the annoyance at the fact that it was only a few inches past her shoulders and tilted her head to the side as a plot entered her mind. She moved a body over and stared at it. Female. That worked out nicely. She pulled off the headband and stared at the markings on the headband. She couldn't understand it. She shrugged, figuring that she wouldn't need to. The bodies said something about passports. She stared down at the woman and searched for her passport. Finally she pulled it out of a back pocket. She sighed and shook her head. Some things need to be down. She scratched out the last name and scribbled what came to mind first. Uzumaki Yuki. She paused. Uzumaki Yuki. Her strong yet gentle voice filled the air. Where had she heard those names before? Maybe it had to do with her family. She stopped her thoughts right there. It did no good to think of the lives of the dead. Their moment in life was over. There was no need to torment anyone with the thoughts of life. She merely shook it from her head and pulled visors off of another body and fixed the picture on the passport so it would be hers. She smiled slightly at the picture. Her true eye color couldn't be told from that picture. She searched around once more. Finally, she found a black beanie hat on one of the bodies. She pulled it on and tied on the headband. She shoved on the visors and shook her head as she stood. She thought for a moment. Uzumaki Yuki. Let's hope I don't answer to Setsuko. Setsuko mumbled as she threw her bag over her shoulder and began her trek through the country once more. Naruto leapt over a wall and looked around. Training for the day was over. He was free for the time being. Meaning one thing. A grin spread across his face when he caught sight of it. The best place in the whole world. The ramen here was the best. Naruto ran into the building at top speed. The only thought that entered his mind was to get there and have something to eat. He bumped into a woman on his way in. She landed with a thud and let out an indigent oof. Sorry. Naruto mumbled as he stood up. Naruto, by now I think you would have started to pay more attention. A familiar voice spoke from behind him. Forgive him. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. Kakashi looked over the woman as she stood back up. Truth be told, she had a fine hourglass figure. A magenta tube top with a tan-colored jacket over it. The dark boots made no noise. They came up to her knee and tied up. Her dark brown pants were skin-tight. The golden chain earring hung from her cartilage and connected to her earlobe on her right ear danced with her hair as she moved. She reached up and shoved back her dark forest green hair. Her skin was almost snow white with a tint of light blue to it. Although, nothing was very big. However, nothing was small either. Every part of her was perfectly proportioned. Pale skin that seemed to be tinted light blue. Her dark green hair went past her shoulder. It was covered by a black beanie. Black visors stopped him from seeing her eyes. However, what drew the most attention was her headband. She belonged to a village in Cloud Country. Cloud Country. What are you doing here? I was told nothing of someone from Cloud Country coming here. The woman stared at him as though he was a puny insect. She rose an eyebrow as she narrowed her eyes. At least, that's what he thought she did. She was sizing him up, like a predator before it went in for the kill. She sneered at him as thought she had tasted something vile. I honestly think that is none of your business. With that said, she walked off, leaving the two wondering about her. What woke her up on the wrong side of the bed? Naruto turned and smiled at Sakura. Hey Sakura-chan, I thought you were going home. Sakura shrugged. I was, but then I heard that there was some strange ninja in town. I wanted to see if it was true. That, and Sasuke had disappeared. She finished in her mind. The boy still acted as though he didn't know she liked him. Sakura felt herself sigh and shake her head. She turned to Kakashi to ask him about the strange woman. The ninja was nowhere to be seen. Sakura rolled her eyes. Figures. She took her eyes off of him for a second and she's stuck with Naruto. Sasuke was the same way. Sakura glared at Naruto, who was smiling. What? Since it's just the two of us, how about? No, she cut him off. Every chance he got he would ask if she would go out on a date. She didn't even think he really liked her anymore. He just asked anyway as if he felt the same about her as he first did. Sakura turned and left Naruto to his ramen. Naruto merely shrugged and went back to running into his version of heaven. Setsuko turned the corner and was out of the small little village. She scoffed to herself. More like mini-city. There were so many people and streets she had gotten lost in there more times than she could count. And she had only been in there for an hour. She moved to the edge of the forest as fast as she could without drawing attention to herself in any way. With a heavy sigh, the woman leaned against a tree in deep thought, reflecting what had happened for her to actually go into the village. She had only passed through to get some good food. She couldn't cook very well and the smell of food overpowered her good sense. Something that would never happen again. She had almost gotten caught. That masked guy with the kid almost cost her more time than she could afford if she wanted to get away from the 3 dead bodies. Setsuko hit her forehead with her palm. Stupid. That's the last time I go through villages. She snapped at herself. Setsuko pushed herself off of the tree with one foot and turned to be on her way again. This time she couldn't be going through any villages. Why's that? Kakashi asked, standing right in front of her with his usual bored face. Setsuko jumped back a few feet and placed a hand over her heart to try and get it to slow down. Don't do that. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. Aren't you a nin from the Cloud Country? I would have thought that you'd have noticed me. Setsuko glared at him. Listen pal, she snapped as her temper flared. I'm passing through, so there is no need to freak out. Leave me be. That's all I want. Kakashi watched her carefully. Something about her wasn't right. Kakashi could have sworn he saw a red glow from behind her visor. I must insist upon seeing your passport. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. Who did he think he was? The emperor of the world. She felt her temper rise. Get lost. She hissed through clenched teeth and moved to go around him. Kakashi grabbed her upper arm. Your passport, he demanded. Setsuko yanked her arm out his grasp and sighed. If it will get you to leave me the hell alone. She reached into her bag and shoved the passport at him. Kakashi scanned over it. Uzumaki. Kakashi didn't let his surprise show. Aren't you a little rusty? 2 times you have been caught off guard. That's not good for an elite. Hey, if I want a lecture I'll beat it out of you. Setsuko yelled. Kakashi stared at her with unchanging eyes. Definitely related to him. I am going to ask you to come with me. There is something important about your passport. Setsuko shook her head and gave out a huff. Drop dead. I didn't come this far to be told what to do. Setsuko walked past him without a second glance. Aren't you forgetting something? Setsuko looked back at him. What? Your passport. Setsuko glared at him as her put at her hand. He smiled. Well, at least that's what she thought it was. With his mask covering half his face she couldn't tell. Glad you decided to come, Yuki. He grabbed her hand before she could pull it back and the two disappeared in smoke. Setsuko tapped her foot. Somehow she had the luck to be stuck in some waiting room with that Kakashi jerk. She narrowed her eyes behind the visors. The sooner she got out of the village the better. Who knows how long until more of those. Setsuko glanced at Kakashi. He was one of them. What was he called again? Ninja. Nin. What was the difference? She didn't know or care. Setsuko turned to yell at Kakashi when some guy came in. Tsunade-sama will see you now. Kakashi yanked on Setsuko's jacket, pulling her along with him. Come on Yuki. Don't want to keep her waiting. Setsuko felt her eye twitch as she was dragged into the office of this Tsunade. She felt her middle finger press a nail into her thumb. If she had been discovered, they would see more blood from their own wounds than hers. She was led into a room with a woman sitting at a desk. Tsunade-sama. This is an elite ninja from the Cloud Country. Her name is Uzumaki Yuki. Tsunade studied her carefully. Setsuko felt her nail dig into her thumb more, but not enough for blood. You are part of the Uzumaki clan? She asked. Setsuko glared at her. What of it? Tsunade smiled. It would appear that a relative of yours is in this village. Perhaps you two could spend some time together. Setsuko felt panic rise inside of her. His parents would find the truth. I don't want to alienate his family. She stated simply. Tsunade was quiet for a moment. He is an orphan. You are the only family we know of. She told her very quietly. Setsuko was silent. It would mean a great deal to him. Right then there was a knock at the door and a young boy bounded into the room. You wanted to see me Tsunade. He shouted enthusiastically. Tsunade smiled. Yes, Naruto. I wanted for you to wait but I think that it will be alright this time. Naruto blinked as he looked at the three in the room. Setsuko stared at the boy. Kyuubi. Kakashi watched her reactions. Setsuko stood up and walked over to the boy. She squatted to she would be eye level with him. What's your name? Uzumaki Naruto. Setsuko smiled faintly. My name is Uzumaki Yuki. I will stay here for as long as I am allowed. Setsuko lurched forward. This wasn't right. When was the last time she was in a bed? She looked around frantically before she calmed as she remembered the events that led up to the room. A smile graced her lips. I hope I didn't intrude. She mumbled. He didn't seem to mind me staying here. A dry chuckle passed her lips as she got out of bed and froze. Shit. Naruto bit down on his lip as he stared at the cabinets. All he had was some ramen. Naruto. Naruto turned and looked at Setsuko. Yes Yuki-chan. Setsuko smiled at him. She had pulled on her clothes from the day before. I think I might need some new clothes. Setsuko fingered the skirt in her hand gently. She looked around as she placed it back and shoved her hands into her pockets. Naruto had to go train so she was on her own. Setsuko glanced at the clothes on the racks in front of her. Nothing. Everything was so bright. She didn't like those colors. They made her look like a neon sign. Setsuko glared at the skin that was showing. It made it so hard to go shopping sometimes. Setsuko shook her head and left the shop. She needed to find a good store and soon. She paused in front of a window and stared at the dark brown dress. It was backless and only went to the knees. The collar flaps were smoothed out and a belt hung off the waist. She sighed and shook her head. What's wrong? Setsuko glanced at Tsunade. Too much skin, she mumbled before walking to another store. You don't strike me as the modest type. Tsunade persisted. Setsuko looked at the woman. My skin makes people uncomfortable. Besides, it's out of my price range. What about the other clothes? I don't do bright colors. Tsunade sighed. What's the real reason that you are here? Tsunade studied Setsuko. What is your real name? Setsuko rose an eyebrow. Uzumaki Yuki. She stated simply and left quickly. Tsunade followed her. That's what your passport says but I'm no fool. Kakashi noticed it too. You changed it. Setsuko glanced at her before walking into a store. You right. I'm not 114 pounds, I'm 125. She stared at a black GI that had a white trim with gold vine designs on it. Setsuko turned and almost ran into Tsunade. Why are you following me? She bit out. You know what Naruto is. Setsuko glanced about the shop to scan over the people. She quickly walked out with Tsunade on her heels. Setsuko turned the corner into an abandoned street. You wish for him to be killed. Setsuko snapped. He's one of the hidden leaf. I will protect him. Setsuko fumed. How dare you? She growled. You want to know why I chose to stay here. That is none of your concern. The boy shall not be harmed while I am here. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Many people would be trying to kill him if they knew. Setsuko scoffed. Well, I am not. Many people, she stated as she stormed off. Naruto dodged a kunai. Kakashi had decided that they would run through a training course. The entire place was booby-trapped. A twinge sounded and a sea of kunai came flying at him. Naruto glared at them and he had to move faster in order to avoid being nailed by them. Naruto felt his face light up as he saw the finish line. He felt himself break into a run only to fall into a giant pit. Naruto laid at the bottom trying to figure out what had just happened. The young boy stared at the walls. They were completely smoothed over. With a sigh he thought back to the tree climbing exercise in Wave Country. Kakashi shook his head as his 3 students stood before him. Well, 2 stood and Naruto was on the ground, trying not to pass out. You 3 still need to work on the little word called teamwork. So, we will be working on that until I say otherwise. Dismissed. Kakashi disappeared as he usually did. Naruto let out a groan. I want to go eat. Don't you want to go visit with that relative of yours? Sakura asked. Naruto thought about it for a moment. First I have to find out where Yuki-chan is. He mumbled as he sat up. Not hard to pick her out of a crowd. Sasuke scoffed. Naruto was on his feet in a matter of seconds. What was that? Sasuke rolled his eyes. Don't tell you didn't notice the fact that she sticks out like a sore thumb. Even you aren't that dumb, Naruto. Before any more could be said, a familiar voice cut through the air. Naruto. The 3 turned to see Setsuko. She stood with most of her weight on one hip and her hands jammed into her pockets. Yuki-chan, what are you doing here? Setsuko shrugged. Figured that you would want to go eat after training. Come on, I'm paying. A giant grin broke out onto his face. An offer you will soon regret. Setsuko rubbed her eyes as she remembered. She stared down at her own thumb. Was that how it gained that ability? She sighed and leaned against the tree and slid down it. Setsuko looked up and stared at the sky, at least what she could see of it. What are you doing out here so late? Setsuko glared at the little amount of sky she could see. Why did you follow me, Kakashi? She hissed. I wanted to make sure you weren't going to run out on Naruto. Setsuko sighed. If I was going to leave, I think I would have taken my things with me. You could buy new things. With what money? Setsuko snorted. You need a better excuse than that. I'm watching out for Naruto. He is my student. I will not let you hurt him. I won't cause the boy pain. Maybe not intentionally. Setsuko rolled her eyes. Whatever, she snapped. Kakashi was silent for a moment before speaking. Why are you here? Setsuko thought over her words carefully. I am staying here to teach the boy what only another can teach. Cryptic enough, Kakashi replied with sarcasm dripping from his words. Setsuko stared down at the ground as she poked a pebble around. Do you know your real age? Kakashi stared at her. Setsuko flicked the pebble away and looked back up at the sky once more. Why do you ask? Setsuko shrugged. Just humor me. He rolled his eye and stared at her. 26. Setsuko smiled softly. What about you? She pondered over his question before answering. I believe I am 25. I am not sure of my birthday though. Are you? Kakashi stared at her. What's your real name? He countered. Setsuko snapped her eyes over to him and scowled. Is that the only things you and that woman can say to me? She stood up quickly. I'm getting sick and tired of it. Why do you care anyway? She snapped. He's my student, was his simple reply. And you know what the boy holds within him? Kakashi nodded. Of course I do, as do all the adults. Yet you care. Setsuko yelled as though it was impossible. Why shouldn't I? He didn't do anything wrong. Setsuko glared at him. You care even though you know. She snorted at the idea. I find it hard for humans to do so. Humans. Setsuko clamped her mouth shut. She had said too much. You are not human. Setsuko ignored the comment. I am no fool, she snarled. I never said you were. He stated as Setsuko glared at him. You hide it better than others, but I know the look. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. What do I hide? What look? Setsuko's eyes pierced his soul. I am no fool, She repeated. I never said you were. He replied once more. I have seen the way these villagers look at him. Hate. Disgust. Anger. I know it too well. That is why I hate people. They are so narrow-minded. So when I leave, he will come with me. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. I don't think that he will. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. Why is that? His dream is to become Hokage. How can he become Hokage if he leaves? Setsuko was silent. A chuckle passed her lips after a few minutes. What is so funny? Setsuko smirked. Quote. It appears impossible dreams are part of the territory. Kakashi tilted his head slightly as if he was contemplating something. And what would your impossible dream be? Setsuko turned her back on him. Something you will never understand. She disappeared in a blur. Kakashi sighed and disappeared in a puff of smoke to report to the 5th Hokage. Kakashi stood before Tsunade. He had just told her every word the two exchanged. The 5th Hokage folded her hands together in thought. After a few minutes she looked back up at him to confirm what she heard. Are you positive that is what she said? Kakashi nodded. There was no doubt he had heard it wrong. Yes, I find it hard for humans to do so. It is exactly what she said. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose as she lost herself in deep thought again. Finally, she looked up at him. This is not good, Kakashi. Yuki might be a demon trying to free Kyuubi. She muttered as she stood up from her desk. Kakashi, I want you to keep an eye on her. If she is indeed after Kyuubi, then this situation is extremely dangerous. She paused, letting her words sink in as she stared off to the side, as though she was waiting for someone to come out of the shadows. I don't want to have to try and fight Kyuubi. It took the life of the 4th just to seal it away. I don't know what it will take to kill it. Tsunade shook her head and looked back up at Kakashi. She already has positioned herself close to Naruto. I don't want this getting out of hand. Kakashi nodded. Anything else, Tsunade-sama? Tsunade paused for a moment. She looked back up at Kakashi with deadly seriousness. I want to know every secret she has, and I want a sample of her blood. We need to find out exactly who and what she is. Kakashi nodded. Tsunade stared out the window. The 5th Hokage wasn't sure if she had to say it. Tsunade didn't want to say it. If Naruto ever found out, if he found out, then the seal might break, releasing Kyuubi out into the world to wreak havoc. He might not know her that well, but if she was indeed family, may God have mercy on her. For she feared that Naruto would not. Kakashi was about to leave before her voice stopped. Kakashi, if you are given reason to believe that she is an immediate threat, do not let Naruto know that you killed her. It had been a week. A week since she first entered the village. Setsuko stared at the clothes before her. A black silk gi. It was trimmed with white and had gold vine designs in them. The silk pants were the same. A white belt with the gold vines laid on top of it. A white tank top was folded neatly beside the gi. Setsuko found it when had come back from going to the market for food. Over the past week she would find various objects that she had liked. Setsuko sighed and opened the door to leave. She stopped dead in her tracks. A hug weapon lay in front of the door. It was short rod, no more than 2 feet, with giant blades shaped like fire on each side. There was a large sphere where the blade and rod connected on each side with 5 small blades curving down on each sphere. Setsuko reached down and picked it up. It was extremely heavy. Setsuko stared at the weapon in her hands. In totally, it was probably over 7 feet long. Setsuko pulled the weapon into the house and shut the door. She ripped off her visor and stared at it with her red demon eyes. Who is doing this? She cried. Setsuko dropped the weapon to the ground and leaned against the door. She stared at her hands. How much blood had she lost in her life? How much blood had those who met her lost? Too much in her opinion. She clenched her hands together. Setsuko like it here. She wouldn't have to fight. There were so many others that would fight instead. She could rest here. No more fighting. Setsuko glared at the weapon. She picked it up and hid it in her room with the clothing. Quickly she locked her door. The woman left the house in order to find some alone time. Setsuko avoided people as she moved about the village in search of a place to think. The woman finally reached the gates of the village. She passed the guards without any difficulty. She kept on going. Setsuko wouldn't stop until she was sure that no one would find her. Not even that strange Kakashi. She halted after a while. She had no idea where she was. Setsuko checked her watch. It was an old and battered up wrist watch, but it still worked, and that was all that mattered. She had been running for nearly an hour. Setsuko sighed and looked around. Some kind of old gate stood in front of her. Setsuko easily passed over them without a second thought. She walked down an old and forgotten path. She ducked under several branches and hopped over large roots. Finally, she reached the end of the trail. An enormous house stood out against the giant trees surrounding it. What is this place? Setsuko brushed her hand over a railing covered with ivy. I am surprised that aka Yuki didn't recognize this place. A harsh husky female voice filled the air. Setsuko spun around and stared at the wolf. It was the size of a first-story house. Come now, don't tell me aka Yuki has changed so much. Setsuko took a slight step back. Who the hell are you? What the hell are you? She demanded. The female wolf gave a cruel smile, showing its fangs. It's true. Aka Yuki is no more. All that remains is some being with her soul. It gave out a harsh laugh. If I had not seen it with my own eyes, I would never believe it. You are the new blood sorceress. Can you even listen to the wind? I don't know what you are talking about, but I don't care. I have nothing to do with it. Silence, girl. The giant wolf snarled. Do you not know of the great demon aka Yuki was? Who is aka Yuki? Setsuko yelled. The wolf growled. You do not even know of aka Yuki herself. Why would I bother knowing about that thing? Setsuko hissed. It is a curse. Don't you ever say that about my daughter. It narrowed its eyes at her. Aka Yuki. Her demon parents abandoned her. She had the form of a human. It was the most disgraceful thing that could be done in the demon world. I found her in my forest, no more than a few hours old. Instead of eating her, I took her in. Now, my beautiful, ugly daughter is stuck in the likes of you. You are probably only able to use her blood. The wolf laughed. I should kill you right now in order to give my daughter peace. The wolf bared its fangs. Prepare to die, filthy creature. Setsuko glared at the demon as she cut her thumb with her fingernail. I have fought that damn thing since a child. Do not think I can't take on some old hag like you. The small amount of blood shot up and took a form, crystallizing and becoming much larger than it had started. Setsuko held a dark red crystal sword in her hand now. How dare you speak to a forest god in such a manner? The wolf snarled as it charged forward. Setsuko glared at it. A ducked down under a claw that swung at her head, taking off her beanie. She ended up rolling underneath the demon and stabbing upwards. She stopped merely an inch before its belly. Setsuko had to jump out of the way so the wolf would not lie down on her. The wolf grinned. Do you really think aka Yuki learned her blood fighting from no one? A true master can control others' blood. Shit, what am I going to do? Setsuko leapt out of the way of another swipe. I have no attacks without my blood. Setsuko tried to dodge another attack, only it didn't work. In one hit she was thrown against the tree, knocking it over. Setsuko pushed the wood off of her now bloody body. She stood up weakly and put most of her weight on the leg with the least damage. Setsuko spat out some blood and wiped off blood on her face with a torn and battered jacket sleeve. She glared at the wolf before her blood shot forward as if to stab the wolf. It glared at Setsuko once more before the blood stopped. Foolish creature. Don't you ever learn? The blood spears shot back at Setsuko, piercing her skin, causing her head to snap back in pain. Setsuko fought darkness as pain ravaged her body. 6 blood spears stuck out of her. 1 in her right thigh, 1 in her stomach, 2 in her chest, 1 in her left shoulder and 1 in her kidney. Setsuko dropped to her knees as the wolf came closer to her, giving her a cruel smile and a dangerous glint in its eyes. All Setsuko saw before she drifted into the darkness was a hand with lightning around it in front of her. The demon was staring off into space. That's all it ever did in her dreams. But this time it wasn't on that damn rock. No, it stood on top of a bottomless pit of water in darkness. The only light seemed to come from the water itself. Setsuko stood there, confused as to why this dream was different than all the others. Why was she here? She was never here. It had its back turned to Setsuko. Some water rose up and formed into a person. Tsunade was standing there with a calm expression on her face. I'm not stupid, she spoke quietly. Setsuko glared at her. I know that I am gone. What are you doing here? What do you mean? She snapped. This one was chosen to speak. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. Speak. Speak for who? The demon turned and looked at her with a peaceful aura about it. I cannot speak your language, so the one named Tsunade was chosen to speak for me. Tsunade answered. I don't understand, Setsuko muttered. The demon sighed. I no longer exist. I am merely an after-image. Then what the hell are you here for? Setsuko demanded. My powers must not die with you. Chiharu will kill you next time she sees you. Chiharu. The demon nodded. Yes, my mother, the wolf god. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. That thing attacked me. She just killed me. No, she let you live because he interfered. You have to learn to fight without blood now. Setsuko stared at the demon, aka Yuki. Is that even possible? Of course, you just need to learn quickly before Chiharu comes after you again. Setsuko was silent for a moment before she spoke again. How long do I have? Knowing my mother, 2 months. Hurry and wake up, you don't have time to waste. Setsuko's eyes snapped open, only to be greeted with a white ceiling. She didn't have to guess that she was in a hospital. The beeping from her heart monitor told her that much. There was an intense pain in her chest. She looked down at herself to see herself covered with bandages. Setsuko let her head fall back into the pillow. She closed her eyes in thought and was about to drift back to sleep when she heard a soft snoring. Setsuko opened her eyes and looked to the source of the snoring. A faint smile graced her lips as she stared down at Naruto. A realization dawned upon her as the cold air numbed her ears and her eyes had no tint of darkness in front of them. Setsuko looked away from Naruto, ashamed of her appearance. She pulled out a bandaged arm from her blankets and lightly touched her ears. You shouldn't be moving, not after such a close call. Setsuko looked at the doorway. Kakashi had been reading a book. Setsuko stared at him as he read. She blinked a few times and looked away as she mumbled something. Kakashi looked up at her. What was that? Away. She spoke a little louder but he only heard the last word. You'll need to speak louder than that. I said, take him away. Setsuko hissed softly. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. Why? He is your family. Setsuko glared at the white wall. He shouldn't have to see me. Is it because of your appearance? Setsuko remained silent as she stared at the wall. He has been here since the moment you come in. Your appearance does not bother him. He only cares for you. Setsuko closed her eyes. I am a stain upon any human eyes. I should not be seen nor heard. Please, spare him the pain of looking at me and take him away. Kakashi sighed and shook his head. Yuki, you are. Don't call me that. Kakashi watched her carefully. What is your real name? Setsuko thought over this question before finally answering. It doesn't matter. I only need some clothes and then the Hidden Leaf Village will no longer have to deal with me. She muttered before opening her eyes. Please, do not let him see me. Kakashi turned and headed for the door. Wait, aren't you going to take him? Setsuko demanded. Kakashi glanced back at her. You will have to deal with Naruto yourself, Yuki. With that said, he was gone. Setsuko sat up in pain, careful not to disturb Naruto. She was grateful that the gown had a back. Setsuko pulled the IV out of her arm with only a slight flinch from the pain. She tugged of the wires that monitored her heart before going out the window. Setsuko tied the silky belt around her waist. The only clothes that were clean were the ones she had ignored. The black GI fit her perfectly. The sleeves alone went a little past her elbow and her pants only a little past her knees. The GI top had only come together at the belt. Her white tank top was shown along with her pale skin. Setsuko did not bother with taking off her bandages. She was too weak to fight off infection. Setsuko pulled her hair up into a tight bun and shoved some hair sticks into it. Only a small amount of hair flowed from the tight bun. A few strands of hair stuck out in front of her ears and her bangs were not long enough to get into her eyes. Setsuko pulled on the soft and sturdy black slippers that had appeared. The green-haired woman stood up straight before opening her door. She wanted to leave Naruto a small note, explaining her actions. She was surprised to see Kakashi standing in front of the door. You didn't strike me as the type to run away. Setsuko glared at him. What can I do? I am not a ninja. Yuki isn't my name. I don't know who my family is. And that thing is out to get me. If I stay here any longer, Naruto will get hurt. I don't want him to watch me die. The wolf is going to kill you, so why don't you try and get stronger? I have 2 months. Who is there that can teach me how to take on a god in less than 2 months? Setsuko demanded. Naruto will try and fight it for you, Kakashi stated, so you can stay here. You are his only family. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. What makes you say we're related? Tsunade-sama had a blood test between you and Naruto. You are his family, though not immediate. She says you're probably his cousin. Setsuko gave a tired smile at the thought. I would love nothing more than to stay here and teach Naruto the proper path, but I will die. I cannot fight against the wolf. It is a master of the technique I use. I will surely die. Kakashi was silent for a moment. Naruto lifted up his head and wiped away some drool. Yuki-chan was not there. He wandered out into the hallway and looked for a nurse. Excuse me, do you know where Yuki-chan went? The nurse stared at him for a moment then shrugged. She had left earlier, through the window. We don't know where she went, but Hataki-san said he'd get her. Don't know why he'd bother. She muttered the last part. He saw those ears and eyes. Figures that the fox demon had a demon cousin. Naruto glared at the woman's back as she walked away. He knew what she was thinking. He saw it on the other nurses' faces when Yuki had first come in. He had been coming back into the village from some of his own training when he saw Kakashi-sensei coming out of the forest with his bloody relative in his arms. Saying Naruto freaked out was an understatement. Had it not been for his overwhelming worry for Yuki-chan, he would have gone to wherever Kakashi-sensei came from and beat to death the thing that attacked Yuki-chan. He was so worried that Kakashi-sensei had to hold him back from going into the operating room with Yuki-chan. So what if she had different ears and eyes? They looked good on her. There was no way they could make her any less pretty. And besides, she was family. Naruto set off on his way to track down Yuki-chan. Kakashi watched Setsuko place her hand on the doorknob to leave. Naruto would kill him if he let her go. I will teach you what I can. Setsuko stopped what she was doing and looked at him. She was silent for a moment as she tried to figure out what had just happened. Why? Setsuko asked. I don't feel like hold Naruto back from going into the operating room with you again. You'd never guess he was so strong. I nearly had to fight him. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. I highly doubt that is the only reason that you would bother. I will be dead next time I see the wolf god. She muttered. I never would have thought that one of Naruto's relatives would give up like a baby. Setsuko glared at him. What did you call me? She bit out. Kakashi smiled behind his mask. It looked like his tactic worked. You heard me. You don't want to work at something in live. You are a spoiled brat. Setsuko felt her eye twitch. Kakashi just had to push a few more buttons and she would stay and train. No wonder the wolf god was after you. Just the mere sight of you must have disgraced it so much. Kakashi shook his head as if he was ashamed. I hope Naruto doesn't have your backbone. He won't last a minute in the real world. Setsuko stormed over to Kakashi. How dare you? She hissed. Kakashi suddenly started to regret pushing so many buttons. I am no coward. I am staying. And you will train me. Got that? On a few conditions. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. You have to tell Naruto everything. Also, you can't question my training tactics and you can't keep any secrets from me. Setsuko sighed and nodded. Fine. What the hell do y'all wanna know? She demanded. What's your real name? Setsuko. What is your technique? Setsuko shrugged. I dunno. Now it was Kakashi's turn to raise an eyebrow. Listen, all I know is that I can make my blood take shape into anything I want. That's all. Fine. What about that proper path? Setsuko bit her lower lip for a moment. Finally, she decided that she might as well tell him. She needed to train. I am just like Naruto. I was the container for a demon called aka Yuki. Unfortunately, an imbecile sealed the demon. The seal was pathetic really, and the seal merged the demon with the little child I was. I have the blood of a human, but the soul of a demon. Not many people know that. That's why the wolf god is after me. It raised aka Yuki and wants to give aka Yuki peace. I have to fight this thing without a drop of blood being shed, and that's not how I fight. All I have is 2 months. Even with the demon soul I have no chance unless I start to train this very moment, no matter what my condition may be. Kakashi shrugged. If that's the way you want it. Kakashi put 2 books of Come Come Paradise on top of Setsuko's head. Clean the house in less than an hour and a half without letting the books fall off your head, and you cannot touch them with your hands. Setsuko felt a faint blush spread across her cheeks as she stood still with the books on her head. You want me to do housework with the perverted books on my head?" she asked quietly. Kakashi nodded while Setsuko glared at him. Kakashi ducked in order to avoid a frying pan that Setsuko had thrown. "Pervert." Naruto scratched the back of his head. Hinata stood next to him with a questioning look. He had run into her earlier and now she had agreed to help him look. He could have sworn he heard his cousin screaming something. He shrugged it off and went back to looking for her with Hinata. Setsuko shoved an old bag of potato chips into a trash bag. She was disgusted at how her cousin could live like this. It was 2 years old. Setsuko suppressed a shudder and picked up an old cartoon of ramen. "Figures," she grumbled as she shoved it into the bag of trash. Setsuko knelt down to pick up the last piece of trash on the ground. As she shoved the failed test paper into her trash bag, Setsuko looked at the clock on the wall. 20 minutes. She had taken 20 minutes to just pick up all the trash. Setsuko pushed her sleeves back as she prepared to go into cleaning overdrive. She still had to dust, wash the windows, put everything away, sweep, wash the floors, wash the laundry. Setsuko grabbed 2 pieces of cloth, one for each hand. The young woman began to dust as thoroughly and quickly as she could. She paused a few times to stop herself from sneezing. Setsuko rubbed away a smug of dirt on her cheek as she glanced at the clock to check the time. That had taken 15 minutes. She had 55 minutes left. Setsuko fought back a grimace as she began to wash the grim-covered windows. Chiharu looked up at the sky as the wind ruffled her fur. She was on top of a rocky cliff. "Akayuki, is this the fate you left for?" she asked herself. "You could have gone on living here in the forest. Why did you leave?" 2 birds landed on the rock beside her. The tips of their white feathers were lined with a light violet. They had blue-gray beaks and claws, and silver eyes stared at Chiharu. "Seo, Tsuki, forgive me, but aka Yuki's soul must be put to rest." The birds responded with a soft flute-like sound. Chiharu closed her eyes. "The secrets of ninja Shujuku will die soon. I can feel old age eating away at me. I will not last long." Setsuko ran across the room, pushing a rag on the floor with her hands. She reached the wall and quickly shoved the rag to the side a bit and ran to the other wall. Once she reacted, the wall stood up and wiped away the sweat that had gathered in her brow. "Done," she panted with pride. Setsuko glanced at the clock. A sigh of relief passed out of her mouth as she realized that she had 1 minute to spare. "Yuki-chan." Setsuko froze as she heard the familiar voice from behind her. "Why are you balancing Kakashi-sensei's perverted books on your head?" Setsuko, with a face the color of a tomato, turned to face Naruto and some girl. The girl had pale lavender eyes and bluish hair. A faint streak of red was across her cheeks. "Well, there's a good reason for that. I figured you would still be on the windows. This place was so dirty." Kakashi's voice was behind her. Setsuko spun around and glared at him while the books fell to the floor. Setsuko pointed at him as flames appeared in her eyes. She bellowed. "You explain it to him." Kakashi picked up the books and stuffed them away in his pocket. "Dushita, what's the matter?" Kakashi asked as if nothing had ever happened. Setsuko felt her jaw hit the ground. "Yuki-chan, what's going on?" Setsuko sent a wry glare at Kakashi before turning her attention back to Naruto. The girl looked away embarrassed. Naruto, I'll see you later." The girl nearly tripped over her own feet as she left. Naruto waved goodbye to her at the door. "Bye Hinata-chan," he replied cheerfully. "Naruto-kun, I haven't been totally honest with you." She glanced at Kakashi and he shrugged before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Setsuko smiled faintly at Naruto. My name isn't Yuki, it's Setsuko. I'm your cousin, but I only learned that today. Before I had merely thought it a coincidence. Why did you lie about your name? Setsuko sat down on the couch. Perhaps it would be best if you sat down while I tell you everything. It is a long story. Naruto sat down after he hesitated for a moment. When I was born, a demon was sealed into me. AKA Yuki lifted her hand up to her mouth with a distant expression on her face. She bit down on her thumb and sent spikes of blood towards everyone that was in sight. Blood seemed to splash out onto the ground, but AKA Yuki took no notice as she walked by with the distant look in her eyes. Two strange white ribbons were floating around AKA Yuki. The long white ribbons shot out and wrapped themselves around an ANBU that had tried to sneak up on her. AKA Yuki walked on as his blood filled the air. Her feet left bloody footprints as she walked and the blood boiled. AKA Yuki stopped and looked around with a dull expression on her face. She stared at a pregnant woman in pain before her. She was in labor. AKA Yuki held her hand up above her head and blood from her thumb formed a spike in her hand. Her eyes narrowed as she brought the spike down into the woman's stomach. AKA Yuki knelt down on one knee as she tore open the woman. She pulled a young baby girl out of the bloody woman. The demon cut the umbilical cord with the blood spike. She stood up tall as she held onto the baby's legs and started to beat its back. After a few hits, the baby burst into loud cries. AKA Yuki held the baby right side up and looked at it with gentle eyes. She pulled the baby close to her and held it close. She brushed away some blood from the baby's face as she smiled at the child. The smile was wiped from her face. Ah, was all that came from her lips as the demon sank to her knees. AKA Yuki looked over her shoulder to see the Hokage of the village she had attacked. A gray-haired man with wrinkles covering his face. His dull green eyes glared at her as he finished several seals. AKA Yuki let out an ear-piercing shriek of pain as she felt her soul being ripped from her body, her mind crumbling as her heart slowed down. The baby's screams filled the air after AKA Yuki fell to the ground, dead. She laid on her side, holding the child as her body started to fade. The man pulled the baby out of the demon's arms and looked at it. Forgive me, little one, it was the only way. He fell to his knees as the effects of the sealing method started to come. Setsuko rubbed her shoulder. So you see, in detail, I'm just like you. For 13 years of my life I carried the demon inside of me. Then, on my birthday, I fully merged with the demon. That's why I look this way. Because of my demon soul. And now, a wolf god who raised AKA Yuki wants to kill me. It already tried but was stopped before it could finish me off. But, why weren't you able to beat it? Naruto interrupted Setsuko before she could say anything else. It taught AKA Yuki to fight. I use the same technique as that demon. The wolf god is a master of my technique. So I have to learn a new fighting style. Now that chicken pervert will be training me. Naruto blinked a few times. Is there something you don't understand? Her cousin was silent for a few minutes before answering. Who's chicken? Setsuko stared at Naruto in dead silence for a moment. The masked weirdo who is your sensei. She deadpanned. Setsuko laid sprawled out on her bed. The sheets were tangled up in her legs as her hair was flowing over her pillow. She wore black pajama pants and a simple white oriental-styled shirt that was sleeveless and buttoned up in front. A few of the top buttons were undone, but she kept her modesty. The faint moonlight spilt into her room, giving everything an angelic glow. Setsuko rolled over, trapping her further into her bed. Setsuko's cheek rubbed against her silky hair as she breathed lightly through her mouth. In the room next to hers, Naruto was lightly snoring as he too was caught up in his sheets. An old pair of boxers shorts and a large shirt adorned the young boy. The only two known living members of the Uzumaki clan, under the same house, snorted a few times before bringing an arm up to hit their pillows. Setsuko hit her alarm clock as its annoying sounds cut through her dream state. The young woman rolled over in her bed as she mumbled something incoherent and opened her eyes slightly. The look of tranquility that once held her face was blown away as she stared at a masked Junin with his head protector covering one eye. Somewhere in a nearby village, the people were already on their way to work. It was a noisy day already and the sun had only been up for an hour. Every single person was busy with something. However, every one person stopped what they were doing when they heard the most particular sound. Ah! Back to Uzumaki Naruto's house. Kakashi dodged an alarm clock as it flew towards his head with amazing accuracy. I don't see what the surprise is. I said I'd be here by 8. Setsuko was on the other side of the room with the sheets surrounding her after being ripped out of the bed. She was pressed against the wall as if she trying to climb it. After her heart finally slowed down to a somewhat normal pace, Setsuko turned a glare toward Kakashi. Chicken, what the hell are ya doing in my room? She demanded. You weren't at the front door. You need to train. Setsuko pointed a finger at him accusingly. You're never on time, and don't give me some crappy excuse about why. I've heard all about it. Why the hell is this any different? Setsuko screamed. This is life or death. We can't waste minute. You have too much ground to cover. Setsuko's eye twitched. Get out, you chicken. Kakashi opened the cabinet and looked at the contents. Instant ramen, ramen, oh look. Ramen. Whoever would have guessed Naruto would have such a wide selection of food. Kakashi poked the instant ramen and shuddered. He never understood why people made instant ramen. He thought it tasted like plastic. Don't they have anything else? He wondered out loud as he opened over cabinets. I can't cook very well. And I guess Naruto can't either. Kakashi looked over his shoulder at Setsuko. She was standing by the refrigerator in her black GI. Ramen doesn't burn the house down. Kakashi studied her for a moment. What? You don't have any bandages? Setsuko shrugged. Demons come in handy with that sort of thing, I guess. Yesterday, after training, I went to the hospital and they said I didn't need them. Setsuko scratched her ear. So, what are we gonna do today? Since we have very little time, we'll have to jump right into things. For a few hours we'll spar so I know how much you need to do. Then I will go train my team while you rest up. I don't want Naruto after me because you worked yourself back into the hospital. Then, I'll come and get you so we can start working on whatever we need to do. Setsuko rubbed her shoulder then sighed. Fine, let's go. Naruto snorted before rolling onto his stomach and burping. The boy's head filled with dreams of becoming Hokage. Setsuko stood before Kakashi, waiting. They had been standing there, waiting. Waiting for the other to attack. Waiting for the right moment. At least, that was what Setsuko was doing. Are you done yet, Funuk? Coward, Kakashi asked in a bored tone. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. Manshi. Die in agony, Setsuko yelled as she charged forward. She swung a fist at his head. Kakashi tilted his head out of the way and stepped back as Setsuko dropped down to kick his feet out from under him. Setsuko did several back flips to gain some distance from Kakashi. She landed in a stance, glaring at Kakashi. Once more she charged at him, fists flying. Kakashi blocked every one of her punches and even dodged the drop kick from her. Setsuko twisted around into a spinning kick. Kakashi ducked down to avoid it. Is that all you have, Yowamiso? Weakling, Setsuko gritted her teeth together in anger as she let out a sea of kicks and punches. After Kakashi blocked and dodged most of them, Setsuko swung her elbow at his head. Kakashi blocked it. Setsuko threw a fist at his head and he caught it in his head just in front of his face. Setsuko pulled back her other arm and threw another punch. Now he had both of her hands and they both tried to shove the other one back. Never call me a weakling, human. Setsuko growled at Kakashi. Kakashi pushed Setsuko back a little. Wasn't it you who said, I have the blood of a human? Kakashi asked. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. And the soul of a demon. Never forget that. I am not human. Yes you are. Kakashi argued as he shoved her back further. Setsuko glared at him as shoved him back. What the hell is wrong with you, human? Everyone agrees that I am not human. Accept that fact and move on. Kakashi let of Setsuko's fists and moved out of the way as she went tumbling forward. He pushed her lower back as she went past him, causing her to fall into a large puddle of mud. Setsuko pushed herself up and spat out some mud. There is nothing I can do for you, Kakashi told her with a sad look in his eye. Why not? Setsuko demanded. Your only problem is that you can't control your emotions. You can fight when you think. Kakashi turned to walk off. I thought you said that you would teach me. Teach me a technique. I can't fight against the wolf god like I am now. Setsuko yelled after him. Kakashi had stopped. She taught aka Yuki everything she knew. I only know what she knows. You have to teach me something. You have to come to terms with yourself before I can teach you anything. After he threw that over his shoulder, Kakashi left. Setsuko watched the direction that he left, her eyes wide and shock written across her face. She paid no attention to the rain that had started to pour down on her. She just sat there, in the mud, staring in a trance. Her mind seemed to have stopped. Kakashi shook his head as he stared at his team. All three of them stared in shock at him. But, you, never. Sakura sputtered. You can't be the real Kakashi. Naruto yelled. I have to agree with the Dode. You just don't do this. Sasuke muttered. Kakashi sighed. Fine, if you want me to go and come back in a few hours. No, they all shouted. Kakashi's sweat dropped at this. I guess this is what I get for finally showing up on. Alright, since it's raining, we'll do some training with rain. Setsuko was staring down at the mud. Night had fallen and she was still in the same spot, only now she looked at the ground. The events of Kakashi leaving her there played over and over in her mind, trying to make some sense of what had happened. What the hell is wrong with you, human? Everyone agrees that I am not human. Accept that fact and move on. Kakashi let of Setsuko's fists and moved out of the way as she went tumbling forward. He pushed her lower back as she went past him, causing her to fall into a large puddle of mud. Setsuko pushed herself up and spat out some mud. There is nothing I can do for you, Kakashi told her with a sad look in his eye. Why not? Setsuko demanded. Your main problem is that you can't control your emotions. You can fight when you think. Kakashi turned to walk off. I thought you said that you would teach me. Teach me a technique. I can't fight against the wolf god like I am now. Setsuko yelled after him. Kakashi had stopped. She taught aka Yuki everything she knew. I only know what she knows. You have to teach me something. You have to come to terms with yourself before I can teach you anything. After he threw that over his shoulder, Kakashi left. Setsuko watched the direction that he left, her eyes wide and shock written across her face. She paid no attention to the rain that had started to pour down on her. She just sat there, in the mud, staring in a trance. Her mind seemed to have stopped. Come to terms with myself? Setsuko asked herself with confusion written all over her face. The woman stared at the ground hard. I have, she whispered to herself. There is nothing else for me to come to terms with. I don't understand, Kakashi. What is left? Setsuko looked up at the sky, up into the rain. What do I have to know? Tell me, Setsuko yelled. She stood up finally. Her eyes fell to the ground once more. I know what I am. I am neither human nor demon. I know that. What else is there? Setsuko brushed away some of her green hair. I don't understand. Setsuko stared down at herself. Her hair was a mess. The bun and hair sticks were hanging on by only a thread. The rain had pushed them down and about. Her hair stick fell to the ground with a soft thud as the wind blew them out. Forest green hair tumbled past her shoulders. Setsuko paid no mind to it though. There's the whore. Her head snapped up at the voice, anger surged through her. Her, a whore, that hurt. It was a group of them. Just like the ones before she came to the village with her cousin. Cloud Nin were there, in front of her with hate written all over their faces. Setsuko narrowed her eyes at them. She felt her temper flare. What is it you want? She demanded over the pouring rain. You killed our teammates. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. She'd killed too many to know. Besides, how did they know it was her? I think you took a hit to the head. One let out an ugly laugh. We had some of our dogs tack ya. Now we're gonna pay. A faint smile danced over Setsuko's lips. Shadows hid her eyes. The wind blew her hair up as though it was a flag. A cold laughter filled the air. Setsuko lifted up her head, revealing her blazing crimson eyes that were wild and bloodthirsty. She lifted her hand up to her mouth. A snide remark passed her lips. Oh dear, and I left my wallet at home. The woman bit down on her hand, letting the blood run out over her. Setsuko lifted her arm up and made a swiping motion with it. The blood soared off of her hand, towards the Cloud Nin. It landed on a few, causing them to drop to the ground, screaming in agony. Acidic blood ate away at them. More blood flowed from her wound. She held out her hand and it formed a sword. Setsuko didn't wait for an answer as she disappeared in a blur of speed. A cloud nin stepped back as his friend's head was removed. Setsuko stood behind the body that was fall to the ground. Before she could move, fire surrounded her. Only 3 nin were left. One of them was controlling the fire. What do ya have to say to that, Yahor? Setsuko smirked. Shiname Kyugen Iza, we will play now. Setsuko switched the sword to her other hand as more blood oozed out of her bite mark. The blood shot forward at the cloud nin who was controlling the fire. Setsuko walked through the forest. The rain was washing away the blood. She looked down at her bitten hand, it had already healed. She let her hand drop back down to her side. A faint smile graced her features. I thought I had 2 months. I do not. Setsuko nodded and turned to face Chiharu. Your blood led me straight to you. Any demon could smell it miles away. Setsuko stared at Chiharu. I know. That's why I made it such a bloody battle. Setsuko smiled. Chiharu laughed. So you wanted your last breath to be against me now. Setsuko nodded once more. The wolf god showed what some might consider a smile. Well then, I guess you know that you will never be aka Yuki nor can you use her powers. Especially against me. Setsuko still smiled at the old demon. Aka Yuki means bloody snow. You named her that because of her skin. White as snow with bloody vines on it. Setsuko's calm look turned to hate. That thing chose me and condemned me to hell. Now, I shall take you with me. Setsuko hair blew in the wind once more. Die filth. Setsuko dodged a claw and jumped back to try and put some distance between the two. She crouched down as the wolf swung at her again. Shit. I'm running out of ideas. Setsuko rolled to the side and barely avoided being hit. Setsuko flipped back to avoid another swing. She took a deep breath as she calmed her mind. Stay in control. Setsuko dodged the wolf's bite and rolled out of the way. Think damn it Setsuko. Setsuko bumped into a tree. The wolf growled as it came closer to her. Let's see. Attacks. Anything but blood. Seals. What hand seals do I know? Exclamation mark single quote. Setsuko came up blank and ended up rolled under the wolf, barely missing its fangs and claws. The tree that she had been pressed against was only splinters now. What was all that hand crap? She backed up as the wolf turned to her and laughed. Screw it, who needs hand crap? Setsuko forced charka into her hand. A faint silver glow came from the small ball of charka in her hand. Setsuko clutched the ball in her hand tightly as it shook violently. She threw the ball at Chiharu but it was shaking too violently and missed completely. Is that the best you can do filth? Setsuko started to panic as she backed up even more. She could think of anything else. She felt herself press up against another tree. Come on, think. It's too violent to go through the air. What else? The answer came to her as she gathered another small ball of silver into her hand as she closed her fist. She raised the fist with the faint silver glow into the air above her head. The wolf laughed at her. Setsuko smirked before she finished. Sa Oyobi Kuzuru. Come now and die. She threw the small ball of silver into the ground. It ripped apart the ground as it headed toward Chiharu. The wolf god leapt out of the way as the trees behind it exploded. The wolf smirked as it stared at the pieces of wood that were raining down to the ground. So you have learned to use more than your ninja shujuku. Not good enough. Ninja shujuku. Setsuko whispered in confusion before she leapt out of the way of a claw. Part of her sleeve was ripped. Setsuko glared at the wolf god. Why do you try and kill me? Because you are aka Yuki's human counterpart. She left this forest, knowing that would happen. The wolf snarled. Setsuko shook her head. I am not human. Setsuko spat out. The wolf grinned. You have human blood. Don't tell me you think that aka Yuki turned you into a freak. Exclamation mark. Your appearance was warped, yes, but not your blood. Your minds and souls were merged, taking aka Yuki's very being from this world. You are a fool to think that does not make you human. Setsuko froze in shock and was hit by the wolf's claws. Aka Yuki understand that appearance did not matter. To be a true ninja tatsujin you must accept only your blood. Setsuko laid on the ground in shock. I am human. But I don't look it. I don't have a human soul. Single quote. She felt herself being picked up and thrown across the clearing. The wind was knocked out of her as she hit a rock and slid down it. She stared up at Chiharu with distant eyes. Setsuko did not appear to be looking at Chiharu at all. The wolf god stopped dead in its tracks. Aka Yuki. It whispered quietly. The wolf took a step back. It can't be. Those eyes, that look. Unknown to Setsuko, her eyes had turned a bright gold. Setsuko stood up as though she was being pulled by strings as if she was a puppet. Hello mother. What are you doing Chiharu? Setsuko and aka Yuki. Human blood in a body harvesting a merged soul, giving the child the ageless knowledge of the demons. That was the way it was to be. Now you come here and try to kill her before her time to use the ageless knowledge. Explain yourself. Aka Yuki demanded through Setsuko. What are talking about? You could have lived with me in the forest. Instead you go off to die. And now this filth comes here saying you cursed it. It doesn't even understand the meaning of ninja shujuku. You accept me to let this thing go on living. I will not let that thing live on ninja shujuku. Setsuko closed her eyes. Leave now, and never do such a thing again. Aka Yuki no Yoka, I raised you. How dare you speak like that to a god? Setsuko glared at her. How dare you go against the earth? Leave now before you face the wrath of the Uendo Bensha. She hissed. Chiharu glared at her daughter for a moment before leaving. Setsuko closed her eyes once more and sighed. There is not enough residue energy of myself left in this merged soul to take control again. But, I already knew this would happen. Now, to make sure that the Uendo Bensha is Setsuko. Mekoramado, Geidu Kashi, Geidu Kokushibu, Shukatsushi or Yobadashi Otaku, my Kayume aka Yuki no Yukai, or Yobadashi Otaku. Tamani my Dumajin, Tanshinfunen my Ryoku tame Kono Ninganteki, or Nozomi Kono Kara Otaku. Mekoramado, Geidu Kashi, Geidu Kokushibu, Shukatsushi or Yobadashi Otaku, my Kayume aka Yuki no Yukai, or Yobadashi Otaku. Tamani my Dumajin, Tanshinfunen my Ryoku tame Kono Ninganteki, or Nozomi Kono Kara Otaku. Mekoramado, Geidu Kashi, Geidu Kokushibu, Shukatsushi or Yobadashi Otaku, my Kayume aka Yuki no Yukai, or Yobadashi Otaku. Tamani my Dumajin, Tanshinfunen my Ryoku tame Kono Ninganteki, or Nozomi Kono Kara Otaku. Blind wind, answering to apparent death, answering to black death, bleeding to death I call you, my former name aka Yuki, I call you. For my namesake, transfer my power to this human, I wish this from you. Blind wind, answering to apparent death, answering to black death, bleeding to death I call you, my former name aka Yuki, I call you. For my namesake, transfer my power to this human, I wish this from you. Blind wind, answering to apparent death, answering to black death, bleeding to death I call you, my former name aka Yuki, I call you. For my namesake, transfer my power to this human, I wish this from you. Setsuko opened her eyes. The sun was rising. She sat up and put a hand on her forehead to try and soothe the pounding against her skull. The rain had stopped and now the forest seemed refreshed and alive. Setsuko looked around her to find a few of the trees destroyed and blood everywhere. She felt something sticky on her forehead. Setsuko pulled her hand away to see cold blood on it. Then the memories of the previous night washed over. Kakashi turning his back on her, the Cloud Nin, the blood battle with the wolf god. But, shouldn't she be dead? The wolf god was out for her blood and Setsuko had been disabled, allowing Chiharu the chance to finish her off. Why was she still here? Setsuko glanced back down at her clothing. She was bloody. She'd have to get home soon and shower. Setsuko stood up and glanced around before disappearing in a blur. She hadn't noticed that she wasn't alone in the forest. A shadow had appeared just a moment after had attacked with the silver ball of Charka and watched over her all night. It had almost jumped into the fight but aka Yuki appeared before that happened. The shadow dropped down onto the ground to reveal Kakashi. In his hand he held her two hair sticks. Thought she would have looked for these. Setsuko stood in the shower, staring at the wall with the hot water beating into her skin. She raised a bloody hand and pressed it against the wall. Blood ran down it as Setsuko closed her eyes. The water was stinging as it washed away the dirt and blood from her wounds. Setsuko opened her eyes and glared at the wall. Arg! Setsuko yelled as she punched the wall. She punched it several times, destroying the tile before she stopped. The blood from her newly cut knuckles was washed away. Setsuko pushed back her hair and sank to the ground. She pulled her knees up to her and wrapped one arm around them. She pressed her free hand against the wall in front of her. She stayed like that for over an hour. The water had turned freezing, but she didn't care. She didn't notice. She didn't hear a knock on the door. She didn't hear it open or her name being called. Naruto used a towel to pat off extra water on his cousin's hair. He got her blow dryer, plugged it and dried her hair with it. He had found her in the shower totally out of it and close to catching her death from cold. The water had been freezing but she hadn't noticed it. Now, just to make sure none of you get the wrong idea, they are family. Keep your minds out of the gutters. All I can say to that is www. Naruto turned off the hair dryer and looked at his cousin. Over the small amount of time she had moved in, they had bought a few pieces of clothes and other things for her. She wore a soft and warm gray pajamas. The pajamas were a little too big for her and she would occasionally tip on the extra bit of fabric of the pants. The button-up pajama top was too big and the sleeves were past her hands. He smiled at her as he took her hand and led her to her room. "Come on, Setsuko-chan. You need your rest." Setsuko stared at him with sad and empty eyes as he opened the door to her room and stopped next to her bed. He started to pull back the sheets when Setsuko hugged him from behind, surprising him. "Naruto-kun, why do you have the dream of becoming Hokage?" she whispered. Naruto blinked a few times before answering. "To be recognized for something more than the 9 tails. Don't you have some big dream?" Silence followed his question. Setsuko hid her face in his hair. What is my impossible dream?" she asked out loud, trying to make reason to herself. "It is something that a demon such as myself will never have. A stain upon humanity shall never fulfill a dream such as mine," she whispered softly. Naruto's eyes saddened as he reached up and grabbed hold of Setsuko's hand. "Setsuko-chan, you're human. You aren't a stain. Why do you say such things?" Setsuko pulled him closer to her. "I have accepted what I am. I have to in order to survive in this world. I can never look human nor can I be human. But you're just like me. You are human." Setsuko smiled sadly. "But there will always be one thing that only humans can do. That is something I yearn for more than life itself." She released Naruto. She moved over and got into her bed and pulled the covers over her. "And I fear, there is only one person who can fulfill this dream. But that will never happen," Setsuko mumbled before she drifted off to sleep. Naruto stared at his cousin before brushing away some hair in her face. "Setsuko-chan, who is this person? What happened to you?" Naruto tried to walk away but Setsuko held his arm tightly. Naruto started down at her. After a moment he sighed and crawled under the covers with her, drifting off to sleep in a matter of minutes. He was pulled close to the woman whom he considered a sister and the two cousins slept, finding a small amount of comfort in the knowledge that they were not alone. Okay, there was a paragraph in here that is in Japanese. It was a pain in the butt to write. I used a translator that didn't have some words I wanted, so I had to find other words. It took me over an hour to translate and write it all. So there might be some mistakes. Hopefully, not big ones. If you find one, please send it to me along with the words around it so I don't have to retranslate the paragraph. I do have the translation next to it, but I do not want to have to figure out which words are which so I can fix the translation. If you find one, I'll give you call out. If you have read my other fics, you would know I have not done that other than one time. Also, a special surprise. Thanks a bunch and enjoy. Yane. Naruto was late. Kakashi had shown up before him. That was saying something. Their teacher was always a few hours late. This didn't happen. Not outside of the laws of the universe. The pink-haired Sakura glared at the direction that Naruto lived. "Where the hell is the Dode?" Sasuke demanded. They couldn't train or take missions until Naruto was there and he wasn't. The ninja wanted to train and not waste time. They did that enough as it was with their sensei. Kakashi sighed and shook his head. "Since Naruto isn't here, we won't try to train. Go home or train on your own." With that said, he was gone. Sasuke marched off in the direction of Naruto's house with Sakura close behind him. Kakashi stood before Tsunade, who was currently choking on her tea. "You're early," she yelled once she was done choking. Kakashi winced slightly at her yelling before nodding. Why did people find it so hard to believe that he could be on time or early? "You asked to see me." Tsunade sighed after recovering from her choking experience. "Yes, it is about Uzumaki Setsuko. Your report about her behavior last night worries me." Kakashi was silent as the Hokage stood and walked to the window. "What do you think needs to be done?" she asked with her back turned to him. "I don't think she will do anything that needs to be considered a threat." Tsunade chuckled at his response. "Is something funny?" The woman turned to face him with a smile on her face. "Hitaki Kakashi, I never thought I would see this day. You being like this. I think Come Paradise will go out of business." She beamed. Kakashi stared at her with a confused look. "Pardon, I don't understand, Hokage-sama." She laughed and waved him off. "I'll tell ya when you realize it." He gave a confused look to her as he left. Setsuko woke to the sound of knocking. She smiled when she saw her cousin snuggled into her arms like a little kitten. She carefully got out of bed, making sure not to wake her cousin, and went to the door. Setsuko opened it and rose her eyebrow as she saw his two teammates. "Can I help you?" she deadpanned. The boy with raven hair glared at her. "Where's the dode?" Setsuko felt her eye twitch. She clenched her fists together before biting out her next sentence. "I hope you aren't talking about my cousin, Naruto." Sakura spoke before Sasuke could retort. "We were wondering about Naruto. He missed training and that's not like him." Setsuko turned a skeptical eye towards her. "What are you, the Gaki's Yakusha?" Brat's translator. "Yakusha?" Sakura asked. Setsuko smirked as Sasuke glared. "Yeah, you translate manners for the Gaki. Since he doesn't have any." Sakura bit her tongue from saying some retort about Setsuko. Sasuke glared at her. "Looks like being a dode runs in the family." Setsuko glared at him as she moved her hand behind her back. The silver orb formed in her hand as she glared at him. "As does being cold-hearted." She snapped as she threw the silver orb into the ground towards Sasuke and slammed the door. She stormed away to her room as a loud explosion was heard. Setsuko almost ran into Naruto. "Naruto, I didn't mean to wake you." "That's okay." Naruto waved her off. "So." The young boy bit down on his lip as he tried his best at a puppy dog pout. Naruto. Setsuko was starting to worry. If possible, his eyes seemed to have become bigger. Setsuko felt herself take a step back. "Setsuko-chan. IWUVU." Setsuko took another step back with fear in her eyes. He wanted something big to pull puppy dog eyes, baby talk, and the I love you card. "So why did you get all sad?" he persisted. "Don't look him in the eyes. Don't look him in the eyes. For the love of God, don't look him in the eyes." But alas, poor Setsuko made a brief eye contact and all hope was lost. She could feel her walls being broken down like they were made of cards. Setsuko looked around for an escape, but Naruto kept on getting in her line of sight. "Please, I'll teach you whatever you want. Kakashi." Kakashi's head snapped up as he exited a small store. Naruto was charging at him with flames coming from his eyes. Kakashi took a step back. "Naruto, was scary. I'm gonna skin you alive." Kakashi made a quick decision to get to the forest so he would have room to move around. "Get back here, you lazy perverted sensei." Kakashi stepped up his pace to get away from his crazed student. "Fine, if that's the way you want it. It's pervert hunting season. I'm gonna mount your head on my wall." A young woman was following him in a light run. She came to a stop and shook her head. She wore a dark brown vest-styled shirt, black pants and boots with wristbands. Her skin was a light peach color and her hair was a long silky Chinese white. Her dark violet eyes widened at the sight of Kakashi running from Naruto. She bit down on her rose-color lip and ran after the two. When the woman reached them, Kakashi had Naruto in a headlock. Naruto was going after his sensei's throat. "I'm gonna kill you." "Stop it." Setsuko's voice rang out over the two. Kakashi looked up to try and find Setsuko. Naruto was still trying to free himself from the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. Please Naruto, leave him be. It was the young woman who spoke. Kakashi gave her a confused look. Setsuko. She gave him a sheepish smile. Naruto-kun taught me how to change my appearance. I think this is how I would look if I had not merged souls. She mumbled as she looked elsewhere. I don't understand why you changed your appearance at all. Setsuko looked up at him with surprise written on her face before she smiled. People don't make such a big deal out of seeing me then. And Naruto-kun told me about Tsunade. Kakashi closed his eyes and sighed. Naruto was still trying to break free of the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. Don't you like it? It's very pretty, so I figured that you would. I could change it if you think it isn't pretty. She rubbed her shoulder as she stared at the ground. Setsuko, I like it. Although I wish you wouldn't hide yourself like that. Setsuko glared at him. Rage consumed her. I hide. You hide yourself. With that mask. I don't plan on looking like this all the time. But at least I won't be treated like trash for no reason other than my looks. When I sleep or fight or am at home I won't look like this. Not around those I love. Not around Naruto or why. She clamped her mouth shut. Setsuko turned from him. I understand that you don't like me hiding. But I'm not. I'm just trying to avoid being judged because of my soul's effects. When around those I trust I won't look like this. But until I can walk through the world without a cold glare sent to me because of my looks. I will look like I should have. This was what I was meant to be. Kakashi was silent. Naruto was still trying to free himself from the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. I think I left the stove on. I need to get going. Kakashi watched her hurry back to her home. His heart went out to her. She went through so much and he had to say something like that. He looked down at his student. Naruto was still trying to free himself from the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. Naruto, is there a reason you are trying to kill me? Naruto glared at him while still trying to free himself from the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. And Sasuke says I'm the Dode. Don't you get it? Get what? Naruto glared at him before he stopped trying to free himself from the headlock and go after Kakashi's throat. PFT. You don't deserve to be in her dream. Kakashi stared at him. You know what her impossible dream is. Naruto yanked himself out of Kakashi's headlock. With you it is impossible. If you can't figure it out with just the way she talks about it, then she shouldn't give you the time of day. Naruto stormed off. You can forget me showing up for training. I won't be there until you figure it out. Setsuko pulled her black gi out of the soapy water. She fingered it gently. She was surprised at how tough the fabric was, even thought it was so soft. Setsuko stared at her pale skin that was tinted a very light blue. A knock caused her head to snap up. Naruto was in the bathroom, so she would have to answer the door. She performed the seals Naruto had taught her and her appearance changed once more. Setsuko opened the door to a Tsunade. Tsunade-san, what are you doing here? Tsunade rose an eyebrow. What? No, come in, O noble Hokage. What a lovely surprise. Setsuko stared at her a few minutes before stepping to the side. Noble I thought that I had an ego. She muttered dryly as Tsunade came in. Is there something you need? The old woman with an appearance of youth rolled her eyes. So you decided that I can't see you? Setsuko gave her a confused look before it dawned on her. A faint blush spread across her cheeks as she changed back to her original appearance. Better. Setsuko glared at Tsunade. It's not better. People hate me like this. She huffed as she leaned against the wall. Tsunade had a faint frown on her face before she chose to ignore it as Naruto came into the room. Hey ya old hag. Tsunade felt her eye twitch before she coughed to try and change the subject. Setsuko, now that both you and Naruto are here, I think that maybe the two of you should live in the Uzumaki estate. Setsuko blinked a few times along with her cousin. Why hasn't Naruto moved in there before now? The fifth Hokage smiled. It's so far out in the forest, no one thought it would be safe for only one person. Setsuko rose an eyebrow. Come, I will show you the estate. Naruto walked behind Tsunade with his hands behind his head. Setsuko had changed her appearance to the white-haired and violet-eyed woman once more. So, What's up with the Uzumaki estate anyway? I mean, couldn't I have lived there with a guardian or something? Tsunade shook her head at Naruto's question. I'm afraid not, Naruto. The Uzumaki clan was very careless at times. They were as large as the Hyuga clan. However, many never lived very long. Why not? Setsuko walked beside Naruto as his hands dropped to his side. The Uzumaki clan practiced a type of jutsu that no one else dared. And only the main family tried it. The darkness devoured many who tried to use it. Setsuko stopped, causing the other two to stop and look back at her. So you're saying that our clan used some kind of dark magic? Tsunade nodded. You can say that. It was because of that jutsu that they lived so far into the forest. They had almost everything they needed in order to never enter Konoha. The Uzumaki clan was paranoid at times, with good reason. They never wanted anyone to have the jutsu. Not even I know the name of it. They buried it deep inside their walls in blood. Because they never wanted anyone to have to pay the price for this jutsu. Setsuko stared at the Hokage. Like us, she whispered. Naruto gave her a questioning look as the Hokage nodded. What do you mean? Setsuko gave her cousin a sad smile. The demons inside of us. That was the price. We could contain endless amounts of charka that demons carry. They can be sealed inside of us because of that jutsu and its price. Naruto looked down at his stomach. We have paid the price for our family. So we were chosen by the Hokages because only we had the ability to contain the demons without being destroyed. Setsuko nodded with her eyes downcast. The same should be said of our children, if we ever have any. She trailed off with a faint blush. Setsuko looked back up at Tsunade after a moment. Please, let us go to the Uzumaki estate. I feel anxious to see it. Tsunade nodded and the three continued. Setsuko, we appear to have a bit of a problem. Tsunade changed the topic. I think that the best way you could stay in the Hidden Leaf Village is if you contribute more. That way it will be easier for you to be a member and under my protection. Setsuko sighed as she rubbed her arm. I see some of my problems from my past has caught up with me. She mused. What do you need me to do? Tsunade glanced back at her while Naruto gave Setsuko a funny look. One of two things, you can either marry or teach a team of genin. Setsuko felt her face turn bright red. Don't I need tea to be a JJ Junin? She stuttered. Tsunade chuckled lightly as Naruto glared at the Hokage. I think we can make an acceptation for you. We had a team of genin but the Junin that was their sensei was killed on their last mission and I feel that they can learn a lot more from you than anyone else. Setsuko rubbed her shoulder once more before nodded. I guess I'll teach them. She whispered. Naruto folded his arms and grunted. Good. That jerk shouldn't be given the time of day. He muttered dryly. Tsunade smirked at Naruto's brotherly behavior. Those two have done each other good. Ah, here we are. This was a shortcut so it usually takes a little longer. Setsuko felt her eyes widen. It was the same estate that she had met the wolf god at. Kakashi knocked on Naruto's door. No answer. It had been 3 days since Naruto had tried to mount his head on a wall. True to his word, Naruto had not shown up for training. Once more he knocked. Finally he sighed and shook his head. Kakashi turned around to leave but bumped into someone. He looked down at the young woman who he had bumped into. Setsuko. She looked like any other person on the street. Setsuko looked up at him. She wore her black gi and her hair was pulled back into a low ponytail. On her forehead was a forehead protect similar to the one she had worn when she had appeared as Uzumaki Yuki. But this one had the leaf symbol on it. Hataki-san, what are you doing here? She had an indifferent tone in her voice. Kakashi seemed a little hurt at the Hataki-san part. I had come by but no one was here. Why? Setsuko stood to her full height but that was only a few inches shorter than him. Naruto-kun and I have moved into our family estate. Kakashi's eyes widened. Setsuko-chan, do you even know the history of that estate? It's said to be cursed. Does the Hokage know? Yes, she was the one to show us there. With that said, Setsuko moved past him and into the house. I just came here to get one last thing. Then we will be completely moved in. She went to her old room without a second glance at Kakashi. She knelt down and pulled out the huge weapon out from under her bed and wrapped it in a sheet. The 12 blades of death. When did you get that? Setsuko glanced behind him. Why do you care? She demanded as took it outside. Setsuko slung it behind her head and threw her arms over it. You have nothing to teach me, you said so yourself. She snapped as she walked away. Setsuko, wait. Setsuko felt Kakashi put his hand on her shoulder. Kakashi gently pushed her hairpins into her hair. Setsuko felt her eyes widening as she realized he had her lost hairpins. Setsuko turned to look at him only to find Kakashi gone. She stared at the ground for a moment before marching back to her new home. Naruto laid on the floor in a large living room. The furniture was elegant and comfortable, but it was too dusty to use at the moment. Naruto was reading a large leather scroll. It was torn and tattered, but the words were still readable. He heard the door open and slam. Naruto winced slightly at his cousin's actions. Naruto, Setsuko put the 12 blades of death against the wall. What are you doing? Naruto glanced back at her as she sat down next to him. Just reading more about our family's jutsu. Setsuko nodded and looked over his shoulder. Have you learned anything new? Naruto gave her a fox grin and laughed. It's a little too hard to translate all those scrolls from those dead languages in a few days. Setsuko shrugged. It is in our blood. It comes to us naturally. Maybe for you, but I've never been good at that sort of thing. What about you? Setsuko grinned and stared at her right arm. There was a black wristband that had ancient writing all over it. Kokue Hando Jutsu and Mu Hinto no Jutsu. Knowing that these jutsus are part of us has made it hard for me to sleep. I've had the time to train with them. I know only the simple ones, the others give me a headache when I start to translate them. Naruto sat up and pulled his feet close to him. Do you know what that word says? He pointed to a word. I have been spending the past couple of days trying to figure it out. Setsuko stared at it, her eyes closed as she shook her head. No, and it looks like it is an important key to that jutsu. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Too bad our clan didn't leave a translating book, huh? Setsuko opened one of her eyes and stared at him. A lot less headaches in the long run. She smirked as her cousin rolled his eyes. Naruto tackled his cousin, laughing as she fell back and put him in a headlock on the ground. She let go as soon as he started to tickle her though. Ah ha 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 ha. Stop. Ha 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 ha. Setsuko felt tears gather in her eyes as she begged for her cousin to stop. I'm ha 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 ha. Gonna ah. P. Ah ha 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 ha. Naruto finally stopped. I'm not cleaning up your pee. Setsuko whipped the tears away from her eyes as she sat up. She shot him a grin before she tackled him and started to tickle him. Diversion silly. Naruto tried to crawl away, but Setsuko grabbed his feet and yanked off the shoes he was wearing as she tickled his feet. No, stop. Naruto cried in between laughs. Setsuko shook her head as she laughed with him. Finally, after a few minutes she smothered him in a hug. Ew. Get off. Naruto laughed. Setsuko shook her head once more. Nope. Cousins gotta stick together. She wore her Chinese-styled shirt and black pants pajamas. Setsuko unrolled the scroll on the old desk in the room she had taken. Naruto was in the next hallway. She sat on the old chair with a candle lighting the room for her. Earlier that day Naruto and she cleaned the place up a bit. He had used his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to make things go faster. Lately, he had been trying to show her a lot of his techniques. Setsuko sighed as she stared at her wrist again. It still had the wristband on it. He wants my attention. Setsuko rested her elbows on the table and sighed as she looked down at the desk. I came here, saying I knew what it was like, saying I would protect him. And the second things get hard, I start to ignore him. Kakashi turned his back on me, so what do? I shut down like some schoolgirl, leaving Naruto to pick up the pieces. I learn about our family and I throw myself into the old scrolls, ignoring him. I'm no better than the villagers. At least they glare at him. I just stare at these scrolls, and in a few days I'll be with my team. Idiot. Setsuko rolled the scroll back up and stood. She shoved her feet into her slippers and picked up the candle. Silently she moved down the hallway and onto the next. She pushed open his door as quietly as she closed and closed it. Naruto was drooling on his pillow. Setsuko couldn't help but smile. This was the boy that learned the powerful technique the Rasengan in a week. She had seen the damage it had done. And it had scared her. Something she did not like to admit. Rarely was she scared. Not even the wolf god had scared her when she was about to die. Setsuko felt her smile fade. She knew the wolf was coming for her. At that every moment she felt it coming towards her. Setsuko brushed some hair away from his face before leaving for her room once more. Once in there she changed into her usual fighting clothes. She tied the belt around her waist before pulling on her forehead protector. With relative ease she picked up the 12 blades of blood and left to confront the wolf god. So aka Yuki has made sure that the Shinigami came to you. Setsuko cocked an eyebrow. I thought that the name was 12 Blades of Death. The wolf god threw her head back and laughed. Humans. That is what they call weapons like the Shinigami. 12 blades sharpened to the point of cutting through rock with ease. But, the ultimate 12 Blades of Death is Shinigami. Ancient designs that only appear when bathed in the blood of an enemy. The hardest metal is cut through by that like jelly. Enchanted with power beyond what any human can handle. That is the Shinigami, a god of death turned into a weapon. Aka Yuki brought it to you. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. Aka Yuki is dead. The wolf god glared at Setsuko. You don't get it, do you? Do you know why you chose the name Uzumaki Yuki when you first came here? Do you not wonder why you knew Naruto had the Kyuubi within him? Don't you wish to know how you have been getting those clothes? How translating those ancient texts comes easy to you? Setsuko clenched her fist together. What the hell are talking about? The wolf grinned at Setsuko's outburst. Aka Yuki was the Uendo Bensha. She knew this would happen to her. So aka Yuki made sure that while you dreamt of her, your body would gather what was necessary for you to become the next Uendo Bensha. That was the way she wanted it. But humans are fools. I know this all too well. So you don't screw up and ruin my daughter's good name and her legacy. I must step in. You need to learn how to master being a Uendo Bensha. Something that even my own daughter could not do. Not only that, but master the ninja Shujuku, yet another thing my daughter failed at. Setsuko stared at Chiharu with shock written all over her face. Kakashi stood in Tsunade's office once more. You're 6 hours late, Kakashi. The Hokage deadpanned. It's midnight. Tsunade-sama, I would like to know why you took Setsuko and Naruto to the Uzumaki estate. It is cursed ground. Tsunade laced her fingers together as she pressed her fingers against her chin. Setsuko and Naruto are of the Uzumaki clan. They need to go and live as though they were raised like that. The forbidden jutsus that their family mastered is not only their heritage but their inheritance. They deserve to live on in their clan's ways just like Hyuga do. That is their birthright. Even if the ground they live on is cursed. Kakashi countered. Kakashi, that is only a rumor. Tsunade scoffed. Then what happened to all those ninja sent to investigate? I don't care what you say. Naruto is like me. Of course I would know what was in him by a mere glance. I know those eyes. I stared into them for 13 years of my life. It is because you have the second sight. Chiharu snarled. And because of that, you must accept who you are. Setsuko glared at the wolf god. I know what I am. There is nothing left to know. The wolf god laughed at Setsuko's response. Foolish human, you must remember who you are. The pain that shaped you. That will be all there is that keeps your mind safe. I went through that hell of a life once, I won't live through it again in memories. Human, do you really believe that it will be your choice? As the new Uendo Bensha, your abilities will slowly appear. Slowly forcing you to remember. I don't care. We will finish our battle. Do not leave me alive. I will not face disgrace a third time. Setsuko lifted up the Shinigami and twirled it in the air. Do not think I will lose like some human. She snapped. The wolf grinned. This time I will finish you, just like any other human. Setsuko glared at Chiharu before jumping high into the air. Do not compare me to humans. Setsuko yelled as she brought the Shinigami down towards the wolf god's head. The wolf jumped out of the way in time but lost some hair. I am stronger. Setsuko easily swung the Shinigami at Chiharu without having to stop to change direction. Chiharu moved out of that way but barely avoided being cut. I am faster. Setsuko drove the Shinigami towards Chiharu. I am better. Tsunade looked Kakashi in the eye. They were found partly eaten. The giant wolf god that you told me about, that is what I believe killed them. Kakashi's one visible eye widened. That wolf killed some of our best men and you let Setsuko and Naruto live on the ground it has claimed as its own. Kakashi yelled. Tsunade winced slightly before glaring at Kakashi. Setsuko held her weapon an inch above Chiharu's neck. She panted in rage as Chiharu stared at her. Human, before I die, I have one thing to tell you. Setsuko narrowed her eyes. Those forbidden jutsus cannot be learned by the boy Naruto. They are too dark for him until the Kyuubi is destroyed. Setsuko closed her eyes before nodding. And human, Setsuko opened her eyes and looked at the wolf god. Never forget anything I have told you. Never. Setsuko lifted Shinigami high before slamming it down towards the ground. The wolf god has not seceded. After your report of the last time they met, she stopped in mid-sentence. Kakashi felt it too. A large amount of chakra had disappeared. It was in the direction of the Uzumaki estate. The two shinobis dashed off over to the estate, only to find Setsuko throwing the Shinigami up into the air and performing seals quickly. The two watched Chiharu's body burst into black flames. Setsuko caught the Shinigami as she turned around and saw them. Surprise danced across her face before curiosity covered her features. What are you doing here? How did you? Tsunade trailed off when she saw the Shinigami. The ancient writings on the edge of the blades gleamed in the moonlight covered with blood. After a moment they vanished. Setsuko smiled gentle at them. It is a little late. If you don't mind I think I will go to be now. Setsuko left to two for her home. Hokage-sama. She just defeated the wolf god. Tsunade nodded dumbfounded. With no use of chakra except to honor the god by burning the body. Setsuko came into Naruto's room early in the morning after she locked up all of the forbidden jutsu scrolls. She smiled at him before holding a bucket of cold water above his head. Kakashi stood in front of his team. Once more, Naruto was not there. He was keeping his promise, much to Kakashi's dismay. With a shake of his head he dismissed him. He'd have to talk with Iruka. He'd know how Naruto thought. Of course, that might not be considered a compliment. Anyway, off to see if Iruka can talk sense into Naruto. Setsuko stood out on the estate grounds. There weren't any trees there as she stared at a wed Naruto with an amused smirk. Come now Naruto, it is time to train. I want to see how well you fare against a demon. Naruto frowned. Setsuko-chan, why the hell do you always call yourself a demon? He demanded as Setsuko gave him a faint smile with sad eyes. Naruto, it is the same reason that I want to teach you the proper path. I am no longer human because the demon's soul is my own. Because our souls merged, I am a murderer. I am now the one who slaughtered the Hidden Rain village. But I won't let that happen to you. You won't be turned into a demon. Setsuko finished with determination in her voice. Damn it Setsuko, stop saying you're a demon. I'm not and I am just like you. Kyuubi's sins are not mine. AKA Yuki's sins are not yours. Setsuko glared at her cousin. Naruto, I am a demon. I live as though I was a demon. All I know is death. All I know how to do is kill. That is the way of a demon. The kind of things you tell me of, kindness, love, friends. They all escape me, as they would any other demon. Setsuko closed her eyes for a brief moment before letting her hateful eyes rest upon Naruto once more. Naruto-kun, if you wish to change my mind, then you must be able to defeat me completely. Defeat me so bad that I am near death. A demon cannot be defeated by a human. But a human can be defeated by another human. Naruto stared at his cousin as he debated with himself. Finally, he nodded. If that's the way you want it. Naruto charged towards aka Yuki. She started to perform several hand seals as Naruto prepared his Rasengan for her. A bright orb of blue formed in her hands as she gripped it with one hand, pulling it back slightly. As their hands reached each other a familiar pair of hands grabbed their wrists and sent the two flying. Setsuko landed in a heap of dust and was pinned to the ground as her arm was twisted behind her. Naruto had arms wrap around him to hold him still as he landed and was squashed under someone's weight. Naruto, what in the world are you doing? Iruka yelled as he squashed Naruto under his weight. Setsuko, what the hell were you thinking? Kakashi demanded as he held Setsuko's arm behind her back. Iruka picked up Naruto, still holding him tight so he wouldn't escape. Iruka, you take Naruto back to the Uzumaki house and talk to Naruto. I'll take care of Setsuko. Naruto began kicking and screamed the second Kakashi finished. No way in hell am I going to let that perverted masked freak be alone with my cousin. Let me go so I can beat him to a bloody pulp. Naruto screamed as Iruka carried him off. Setsuko tried to get out of Kakashi's grasp. Get the hell off of me, she snapped. Setsuko, you'll have to dislocate your shoulder to get out of this, and even then I still have your arm. Still she struggled. Setsuko, please, do not make me hurt you. Setsuko glared at the ground. Good, now why did you and Naruto start to attack each other like that? Your intent to kill was felt a mile away. Setsuko sneered. Naruto doesn't get that I'm a demon. She hissed. He wanted to prove me wrong. Kakashi sighed. He's right, Setsuko. You are not a demon. Idiot. I am a demon. How else can you explain my existence? Setsuko snapped. Kakashi glared at her, irritated by her stubbornness. That's it. He picked her up after wrapping his free arm around her waist. Setsuko kicked as she tried to get free. I'm sick and tired of your whole demon existence story. Let me go. Setsuko screamed as he carried her away. Not until you get the fact that you are human. Iruka managed to open the door to the Uzumaki house and close it while holding Naruto tightly so he wouldn't break free. The teacher threw down his former student and glared at him. Naruto, stop acting like a little baby. Naruto glared at his former teacher. I'm not acting like a baby. Now get out of the way so I can stop that masked freak. Naruto yelled. Naruto, don't disrespect your teacher in such a manner. Iruka snapped. Why are you so neglectful of training lately? Kakashi told me that you haven't been showing up and now this. What is going on? He demanded. It's because he's so dumb he's hurting her. Who? Iruka asked Naruto, confused. Setsuko. Naruto yelled at Iruka. How? He's too dumb to get that Setsuko loves him. Kakashi stopped beside a lake as Setsuko struggled to get free. He shoved her down onto her knees and forced her to look in the water at her reflection. Setsuko, tell me what you see, he demanded. Setsuko glared at his reflection before looking at her own. Some of her green hair had fallen out of her bun and a few wisps of hair hung out in front of her elegantly pointed ears. Crimson eyes blazing with anger stared back at her. Pale skin, tinted blue, stood out against her black clothing. A monster, Setsuko replied. A demon who slaughtered hundreds. Someone who bathes in blood. She whispered darkly. Kakashi closed his eyes and sighed. After a moment he looked at her reflection. Setsuko, you once said you had a dream. And that you loved Naruto. Demons can't have dreams and they can't love. You are not a demon. You are not aka Yuki. You are Uzumaki Setsuko. Setsuko looked away from her reflection. Monsters can't feel things. You are human. You talk like one. You laugh and smile like one. You breathe. You run. You walk. You shop. You're in this world and you try to make the best of it. You hope just like any other person. You are human, Setsuko. I don't understand how you believe otherwise. Setsuko slowly looked back at her reflection. For a moment Kakashi swore he saw a faint rose color on her cheeks. But, if no one believes it, are you human? Quote. He saw the sad look on her reflection. If Setsuko could cry, she would have. Just like Naruto. I was hated. Spat on, cursed at, beaten, humiliated, but, unlike Naruto, no one ever even thought of me as anything more than a monster. Quote. Kakashi listened as Setsuko whispered barely above the still wind. Things only got worse when I changed on my 13th birthday. 1,000 times worse. The people decided to hunt me down to kill me. That's when I slaughtered all of them. Like it was nothing. I stood there, watching my own blood slice through them. I don't remember being scared after that. I learned the reason of their fear. I learned how powerful I was, so I stood there, watching them. Watching them die without the slightest pity as they were slaughtered. Children, men, women, babies, elderly, all of them were destroyed, and I didn't care one bit. I thought it was grand, to watch them suffer like me. Setsuko looked away from her reflection in shame. Can a human kill so many with such joy, to watch their village be slaughtered and be happy? Happy that they got what they deserved. Heavy silence hung over the two as Kakashi thought over her words. Finally, he broke it. Setsuko. Anyone would have done the same, even me. You can't fix the past but you can learn. You're guilty for what happened, that makes you human. A monster can't feel guilt. Setsuko felt Kakashi let go of her as she stared at the ground. Kakashi stepped back as if to leave. Kakashi. Don't go. I don't want to be alone. I've been alone too long. Kakashi nodded as he sat beside her while she stared at her reflection. Naruto glared at the door that Iruka stood in front of. He had to fight every urge in his body not to go outside and beat up Kakashi. Iruka said that if he moved then he would never treat Naruto to ramen ever again. It was the only reason he was still there. The front door opened and in stepped Kakashi and Setsuko. Setsuko-chan. Naruto ran in between the two and glared at Kakashi. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry I worried you. She cast a glance at Kakashi who in turn nodded and motioned for Iruka to leave with him. Soon, the cousins stood alone in the main hallway. Naruto, please don't worry about me. You should train. Naruto glared at Setsuko. No way am I training with that jerk. Setsuko gave Naruto a tired smile. Naruto, you need to train and become Hokage. And what makes you say Kakashi is a jerk? He's too stupid to notice you love him. Setsuko's eyes widened and she looked away while a blush swept over her cheeks. How did you figure it out? Naruto sighed and rolled his eyes. Not that hard to put two and two together. I might not be the sharpest bulb in the drawer but I can figure things out. Setsuko stared blankly at her cousin for a few minutes as the wind howled in the silence. You mixed up your sayings, Naruto. The sad things is, I've actually said that when I was trying to be totally serious. Well, review soon. Setsuko's eyes snapped open as the wind howled. She sat up in bed and stared ahead of her, trying to rationalize the eerie feeling that had settled upon her. She got out of bed and made her way towards her balcony. As she reached for the handle of the balcony doors, lightning struck, causing Setsuko to jump slightly. After shaking off her shock, she reached once more. The doors rattled as he hand neared them. Setsuko forced herself to open the doors and step out onto the balcony. Setsuko felt the wind pick up as her feet touched the cold stone outside of her room. Her hair was thrown wildly about in the air. The cold numbed her as she pressed her hands upon the stone railing. Setsuko closed her eyes as the wind screamed at her. She squeezed her eyes shut in concentration as she tried to make out the whisper she heard. Shaw. Setsuko tilted her head to the side a little as she listened with closed eyes. She brushed some of her hair away from her face but it was a futile effort. Setsuko scrunched up her face as she tried to make sense of the whisper. Nsha. Uendo Bensha. Her eyes snapped open as she quickly backed up into her room and slammed the doors shut, locking them with fearful eyes. She pressed her hand against her heart in some useless manner to calm it. Setsuko shook her head as if it would remove the experience she had just undergone. She felt herself sink down to the ground as she stared outside with wide eyes. No, aka Yuki is gone, leave me be. She whispered quietly to no one. Setsuko scratched her head in confusion as she stared at her team. She was far away from them on top of a building. On her shoulders she carried the Shinigami wrapped up in cloth. She adjusted her forehead protector and black GI before hopping onto the next building. As she got closer to her team she slowed down and hopped onto the ground. Setsuko glanced to the sky. The dark thunder clouds had been there all morning along with the fierce wind. She looked away as if that would help her forget what had happened last night. Setsuko finally came to a stop in front of her team. What? No fancy entrance like other Junin? Came a reply from one of the genin. Setsuko glanced at him. Scrawny-looking dark-haired kid with eyes of coal. He wore a loose pair of long jean shorts and a red vest over a white shirt. His forehead protector hung around his neck. He must have been no more than 17. She regarded him with a cold look as she looked over at the other two. They looked like siblings. The older of the two was an Asian teenager around 16. He wore a hooded dark orange sweater with a few foreign marks on the front of it and a pair of jeans. His forehead protector was on his upper arm. He had an indifferent look about him as he sat on a large rock. Last was a girl that might have been his sister. A high-cut t-shirt, short jeans, and a thin jacket with short sleeves and her forehead protector used as a headband. Geez, we got stuck with another dud. Now, Setsuko might not have been a real Junin, but the fact that she knew one made it personal for her. Looks like I got stuck with another snot-nosed baby. She glared at him. I am Uzumaki Setsuko, your new sensei. What a minute, I heard that Uzumaki Setsuko was some weird-looking old freakish hag. Once more that kid decided to be a smart ass. The other boy rolled his eyes while the girl commented. Great, Ricky's at it again. The boy, Ricky, glared at the two. You two are just jealous 'cause my parents. Setsuko cut him off with an edge in her voice. I don't wanna hear any more. I do not want to hear about any grudges. Setsuko decided that if she was going to get a headache, they would have to sweat and bleed first. She would have to play the mean sensei for now. You are a team, my team, and as my team I accept nothing less of perfection. Today, we will see how far from perfection you three are. From this moment on, perfection is what you eat, sleep and breath. We will change the way we talk, we will change the way we run, we will change the way we live. Even looking like anyone else on the street, she was a force to be reckoned with. Sasuke and Sakura were surprised at Naruto's appearance. They were downright shocked to see their teacher only arrive 2 hours late. At which point Kakashi wondered if they needed to get their hearts checked. The Junin brushed off that thought after a moment and stared his students. Today, we'll work on teamwork. I figured that we should ambush Team 28. Naruto blinked a few times before glaring at Kakashi. That's Setsuko-chan's team. Kakashi nodded. Why are we going to ambush them? Kakashi silently sweat dropped. For only knowing her for a short time, he got attached quickly. Big brother complex, thy name is Naruto. To work on teamwork and stealth. What are you, Captain Military? Ricky snorted. Setsuko glared at him before she slowly smirked. Well, how about this, if you have a problem then you can fight me. Should I bleed then you do not need to follow my instructions. No weapons. Setsuko put the Shinigami on the ground as she walked into the clearing. Ricky followed as the girl wandered over to the Shinigami. Setsuko turned around and faced Ricky. No use of any chakra. We fight without fists. You never know when that will be all you have. Ricky smirked. Just don't cry when I hit you. The girl tried to lift the Shinigami. As she failed, her eyes snapped over to Ricky and Setsuko. Janghun-san. The boy on the rock looked over at her. Was as it Sung-chan. Ricky cannot win, Nissan. Older brother Uzumaki-san has incredible strength. That weapon must weigh over a ton as she can carry it as though it was a mere stick. Naruto sat on a branch next to Kakashi as they stared at his cousin kicking the ass of one of her students. Sasuke squatted on the branch on another tree with Sakura standing next to him while stealing glances every few seconds. Kakashi-san. Kakashi looked over at Naruto as he marked a page in book and placed it in his pocket. You're supposed to be smart and all, so figure it out and don't hurt her. You'll have to deal with me then. Naruto leapt down from the branch without making a sound. Kakashi sighed and shook his head. Naruto, she would never put her heart out on the line because she doesn't think I have any feelings for her. Setsuko slowly placed her leg back onto the ground after drop-kicking Ricky. She turned to the other two. Now that that's over, we can. She stopped and spun around to glare at the forest. Cack. Before she had a chance to finish, she was plowed over by Naruto as he, Sasuke, and Sakura went after her team. She was about to speak when she was lifted up and put promptly back on her feet by Kakashi. He merely smiled at her glare before staring at the two teams' battle. She shrugged after a moment. Whatever to get him to listen to me. She mumbled. So how are things going? So far I've been the mean sensei. Kakashi glanced at her. Are you sure that is good? They'll make it their life goal to get back at you. Their hatred for me will force them to come together and put aside their differences. It will make them a team. It appears that is the only way to get them to use teamwork. Kakashi shrugged and stole another glance at her. So, after this I'll take you to where the other Junin usually spend time at and introduce you to the other Junin. Setsuko felt her eyes advert themselves. Are you sure? The Junin nodded as he watched the two teams battle it out. Quote dot dot dot. I'd better separate them. She stepped forward and reached her hand up into the air. A silver orb appeared in her palm as she clamped her hand into a fist. Monasugoi Bakuden. She hurled the silver orb into the ground. Guy laughed at one of his own jokes as Kakashi dragged Setsuko into the small bar. Kurenai and Asuma looked up at the two. Kakashi, who's the lucky lady? Asuma joked as Kurenai merely shook her head and jabbed him in the ribs. What? This is Uzumaki Setsuko, the new sensei for Team 28. So you are the noble Junin who has decided to teach the heartbroken team of 28. You are most honorable. To think that a gem such as you exists in a fair village. Guy rambled as Setsuko turned to Kakashi with a blank look in her eyes. Quote dot dot dot. Who is this? I am Kakashi's greatest rival. So far I have beaten him 96 times and he has beaten me 97 times. But we must do battle sometime soon so that I can once more win. Guy announced as Setsuko stared at him. Before Guy could speak or Kakashi retort, Kurenai stepped in. I'm Kurenai, the only one with a brain here. Setsuko smiled at her small joke. They men responded with a, what? Or, hey, I think Hinata told me about meeting Naruto's cousin. Hi, I met her for a short time. We did not get much time to talk. I didn't realize that you were a Junin. Before she could respond, Asuma spoke. You could give her a second to breath now, can't ya? Kurenai shot him a glare. Setsuko smiled at the other Junin. It looked like things would work out nicely. Setsuko watched her team run through a small D-rank mission. With a shake of her head she turned away. All they had to do was weed some old lady's yard, and even then, teamwork was beyond them. Janghoon took his time in doing everything. He never liked it when she told him to do something. Every chance he got, he would isolate himself from the team. It drove her crazy. The only thing he wasn't lazy at was protecting his sister. Who would have thought those two were even related? They were the complete opposite. Sung was hasty in her work, often having to go back and do it over 3 times, was quick to anger, proof being the broken bones some boys got because they were stupid enough to whistle at her, and extremely friendly. She blew a fuse every time Setsuko even sounded like she was going to leave Sung behind. Ricky, well, he was a scrappy little snort-nosed brat who thought that he was better than every person on the planet and that Setsuko was lucky that she was breathing the same air. Setsuko plopped down on the ground and rested her chin on her fist. Killed on the mission my foot. He either ran as fast as he could or committed suicide. Setsuko grumbled as Ricky and Sung got in yet another fight over some stupid reason. Janghoon was still moving at a snail's pace. Setsuko could feel her hair turning gray. How does Kakashi do this? She was tempted to use the Shinigami that lay next to her. But, Tsunade would have her head if she did. Why did she do this again? Oh yeah, her past caught up with her. Well, she could have married, but no. Had to try to not be girly and go ask the guy she liked. Her face was tainted red from that thought as she mentally scrubbed it from her mind. There was no way he would look at her like that. Oh well, back to the hell she called Team 28. Setsuko looked over at the wall next to her. Oh, escape had come to her. Someone had recently painted the wall and the paint was drying. Something to do other than watch her so-called team. Setsuko, have you seen Naruto? Kakashi asked from behind Setsuko. In an instant she had turned, stood up, and hurled herself into Kakashi's arms, who was bright red from her sudden action. Kakashi-kun, Kakashi-kun, Kakashi-kun. She stared up at him with huge stars in her eyes. Sakura and Sasuke stared the spectacle in front of them with shock written all over their faces. They had a feeling, but this. Kakashi stared at Setsuko with a wide eye. Setsuko, was all he could manage to get out. You have no idea how happy you being here makes me. If possible, Kakashi turned a darker shade of red as Setsuko looked over her shoulder. Team 28, continue without me, if I hear one word that you 3 messed up. She left the threat hanging in the air as she turned back to Kakashi smiled. Thank you. You have no idea how hard it is to not kill those kids. Setsuko beamed as she released Kakashi from a bear hug and turned towards the direction of her home. Naruto's not there. Odd, he left before I did. Setsuko looked back at Team 7. Well, I suppose that we should go look. Setsuko nearly fell over as Team 28 stood behind her with all their work done. How when didn't you but you were just now you how did you how could you but, Setsuko couldn't finish her sentence as she pointed at them and the work. Sung smiled. You don't think we would let you leave us behind, do you? Janghoon stood next to her with an indifferent look on his face. I just used my favorite jutsu to move things along, he mumbled as Ricky smirked. Speed is one of my best qualities. Setsuko took a moment before turning back towards her home with a dazed look on her face. Let's go, was all she could say. Setsuko poked the door to her cousin's room open. She was afraid to go in there. After having to deal with his apartment, she was scared of how messy he could be. The green mold that had tried to eat her broom still haunted her dreams. Quickly she stuck her head in and pulled it out. Not there, she mumbled as she moved on to the next hallway. Her team had been threatened into cooperation. There was no way she'd let those three into her family's estate if they were going to fight. They'd probably destroy most of her home. She turned to Kakashi. I don't think you need to go in there. He was right about to enter her room. Why not? That's my room. Kakashi grinned at her. We should still check. Pervert. Sung's head snapped up as she heard her sensei's scream throughout the estate. She shook her head and turned back to her brother. Janghoon-san, what do you think of Uzumaki-sensei? Janghoon glanced at his sister. Kinda bossy. She's okay though, after all, she did beat up Ricky. He smirked slight at that while Ricky sent him a glare. She got lucky, that's all. He grumbled. Whatever Ricky-kun, Setsuko is in a different league than the other Junin. Sung spoke with a proud aura about her of her knowledge. I wanna learn everything she has to teach. Ricky rolled his eyes. Whatever, she won't last long. Sung smirked at him. Please, with her monstrous strength alone she could beat up anything. Imagine the kind of damage her jutsus can do. Janghoon nodded in agreement. I have to admit, whatever it is that's under that white cloth has to be something amazing. Rumor has it that she was able to kill 12 armies with that weapon alone. Sung smiled at her brother. I heard it was 12 nations. And that she came here to seek refuge from the billions of bounties on her head. Kakashi absent-mindedly rubbed his swollen cheek once more. So, how are things with Naruto going? He didn't want to stay on her bad side for too long. She sported a mean right hook. Setsuko glanced at him after looking in the last room of that hallway. Great, I'd never been so happy in my life. He's like a brother. Setsuko smiled at the thought. Whenever I'm down he does his best to make me laugh, which he always does. When I am tired he tries to do more chores. Setsuko chuckled softly. He's so worried that I might abandon him. She shook her head in amazement. But in reality, I worry that he might leave me. But something's wrong. Setsuko looked at him surprised. After a moment she smiled. You know me too well. She nodded. Yes, something is wrong. Now, it's not that he isn't everything I wanted. Well, maybe he isn't. Kakashi smiled at her. Your impossible dream. Setsuko nodded as she moved on to the next hallway. What is it anyway? Maybe I can help. Setsuko smiled at him with a gentle warmth. Kakashi. My impossible dream is. Kakashi waited for her finish. My impossible dream is. Before she could continue shouting could be heard. Pervert sensei. You cost me training with my team for that. Kakashi turned in the direction that Naruto's voice was heard. Setsuko felt any confidence in her melt away. Kakashi smiled. Ah, it seems like Naruto met up with Jiraiya. Kakashi turned back to Setsuko. Now, what were you going to say? Setsuko smiled quietly at Kakashi. Nothing. It doesn't matter. Well, I'd better dismiss my team. Setsuko hurried away from Kakashi. Kakashi stared after her for a moment before shaking his head. Naruto glared at Jiraiya. You made me miss training so you could peep. Now, I think that's a bit harsh. I was gathering Matmai. Naruto. When did this lovely lady came to Konoha? Jiraiya had seen Setsuko come into the room and had lost any interest in talking to Naruto about gathering material for his books. Setsuko blinked a few times before looking behind her to see if anyone was there. Who? Naruto glared at Jiraiya. That's my cousin, Setsuko. She's not interested in perverted old farts like you. Naruto. I wish you would have told me that you were with Jiraiya. We spent most of the day looking for you. Kakashi intervened before Jiraiya could comment and grabbed Naruto behind his collar and dragged him off. Hey, Pervert-sensei said that he would teach me something new. All he did was have me stand on the water. Naruto shouted as he was dragged off. Setsuko blinked a few times before turning towards Jiraiya. You can walk on water. Jiraiya smiled at Setsuko as a plot began to hatch in his mind. Of course, have you not learned that already? Setsuko felt her cheeks go red as she stared at the ground. Only recently have I become a leaf nin. I was mere a wanderer that happened upon Konoha and I have only just started to use chakra. Jiraiya nodded silently as he absorbed the information. Well, I can't say that I will train you, but I will help you with using your chakra. I'm sorry but I don't think I can do more. Setsuko smiled. Thank you. What should we do? Is there a hot spring close by that we won't get interrupted at? Setsuko blinked a few times. Yes, the Uzumaki estate has one on the grounds. Why? Setsuko felt the sweat gather on her forehead as she glared at the water. Her feet had sunk slightly into it. It had nearly been an hour but she had made improvement. Instead of sinking like a rock she sort of floated. Her had long ago taken off her top part of her gi and lost the black slippers. Her back pants and white tank top were dry and there was no way she would take them off in front of that old guy. He kept on staring at her. It was creepy. But she needed to learn. She could walk up trees now, no problem. But water was by far harder. Setsuko pushed more chakra to her feet and forced them out of the water. She felt her muscles relax as her body adjusted to standing on the water. After a few minutes of adjusting and having her body naturally memorize the amount of chakra needed, Setsuko looked up at the Sennin. Jiraiya-san, I've got it. She slowly made her way over to Jiraiya, who sat on the ground scribbling away as something. As she stepped onto the ground her ears picked up a noise. She looked up to try and find the source. A kunai landed in front of her with an explosive seal wrapped around it. Naruto and Kakashi entered the Uzumaki household. Kakashi-sensei, why are you here anyway? Kakashi glanced at Naruto before looking around the house. I needed to talk with Setsuko about something that happened earlier. And what was th? Boom. Naruto and Kakashi took off towards the sound of the explosion. They arrived at the small bathhouse on the Uzumaki grounds to see an interesting sight. Jiraiya was above Setsuko holding himself above, both lying on the ground in an suggestive position. Naruto felt his eyes bug out as his jaw hit the ground while he pointed a finger at his cousin in the Sennin. Kakashi felt his face go red before he glared at Jiraiya. Naruto was in too much shock to say anything, so Kakashi did the only sensible thing. Way to go, Jiraiya. Looks like all his talk wasn't for nothing. Naruto spun around towards Kakashi. He she you they but no. He sputtered as Jiraiya pushed himself off of Setsuko. Relax kid, nothing you think happened. He grumbled as he picked up the unconscious Setsuko. What did happen? Kakashi asked in all seriousness. Jiraiya glared at the sky. Someone threw a kunai at her with an explosive seal. Looks like your cousin has some enemies out for her blood. Kakashi stepped over to Jiraiya and took Setsuko out of his arms. I'll take care of her, you should get some treatment. Jiraiya nodded. Fine, she shouldn't be out too long. The shock wave from the explosion is what got to her. She had been exhausting her chakra beforehand. How? Kakashi asked as Naruto moved to his cousin's side. She didn't know how to climb trees with her chakra or walk on water. She asked me to teach her and I did. She's like Naruto, ain't she? Kakashi blinked in surprise before nodding as the four headed towards the house. How did you know? Jiraiya shrugged as he favored his left leg and held his left arm. Her chakra itself screams demonic. She ain't a demon but her chakra is not human. Her body would adjust to the amount of chakra and the end. Now we will see you in the next video.